The Ghost. Book 1. By Charles Churchill. With eager search to dart the soul, curiously vain, from pole to pole, and from the planet's wandering spheres, to extort the number of our years, and whether all those years shall flow, serenely smooth, and free from woe, or rude misfortune shall deform our life with one continual storm, or if the scene shall motley be. Alternate joy and misery is a desire which, more or less, all men must feel, though few confess. Hence, every place and every age affords subsistence to the sage, who, free from this world and its cares, holds an acquaintance with the stars, from whom he gains intelligence of things to come some ages hence, which unto friends, at easy rates, he readily communicates. At its first rise, which all agree on, this noble science was Chaldean, that ancient people, as they fed their flocks upon the mountain's head, gazed on the stars, observed their motions, and sucked in astrologic notions, which they so eagerly pursue, as folks are apt whatever is new, that things below at random rove, whilst they are consulting things above, and when they now so poor were grown, that they'd no houses of their own, they made bold with their friends the stars, and prudently made use of theirs. To Egypt from Chaldee it travelled, and fate at Memphis was unravelled, the exotic science soon struck root, and flourished into high repute. Each learned priest, oh strange to tell, could circles make, and cast a spell, could read and write, and taught the nation the holy art of divination. Nobles themselves, for at that time, knowledge in nobles was no crime, could talk as learned as the priest, and prophesy as much, at least. Hence all the fortune-telling crew, whose crafty skill mars nature's hue, who, in vile tatters, with smirched face, run up and down from place to place, to gratify their friends' desires, from Bampfield Carew to Mole Squires, are rightly termed Egyptians all, whom we, mistaking, gypsies call. The Grecian sages borrowed this, as they did other sciences, from fertile Egypt, though the loan they had not honesty to own. Dodona's oaks, inspired by Jove, a learned and prophetic grove, turned vegetable necromancers, and to all comers gave their answers. At Delphos, to Apollo dear, all men the voice of fate might hear, each subtle priest on three-legged stool, to take in wise men, played the fool. A mystery, so made for gain, even now in fashion must remain, enthusiasts never will let drop, what brings such business to their shop, and that great saint we Whitefield call, keeps up the humbug spiritual. Among the Romans, not a bird without a prophecy was heard, fortunes of empires often hung on the magician magpie's tongue, and every crow was to the state a sure interpreter of fate. Prophets, embodied in a college, time out of mind your seat of knowledge, for genius never fruit can bear, unless it first is planted there, and solid learning never falls, without the verge of college walls, infallible accounts would keep, when it was best to watch or sleep, to eat or drink, to go or stay, and when to fight or run away, when matters were for action ripe, by looking at a double tripe, when emperors would live or die, they in an ass's skull could spy, when generals would their station keep, or turn their backs, in hearts of sheep. In matters, whether small or great, in private families or state, as amongst us, the holy seer, officiously would interfere, with pious arts and reverent skill, would bend lay bigots to his will, would help or injure foes or friends, just as it served his private ends. Whether in honest way of trade, traps for virginity were laid, or if, to make their party great, designs were formed against the state, regardless of the common weal, by interest led, which they call zeal, into the scale was always thrown, the will of heaven to back their own. England a happy land we know, where follies naturally grow, where without culture they arise, and tower above the common size. England, a fortune-telling host, as numerous as the stars, could boast matrons, who toss the cup, and see the grounds of fate in grounds of tea, who, versed in every modest law, can a lost maidenhead restore, or, if their pupils rather choose it, can show the readiest way to lose it. Gypsies, who every ill can cure, except the ill of being poor, who charms against love and ague sell, who can in hen roost set a spell, prepared by arts, to them best known, to catch all feet except their own, who, as to fortune, can unlock it, as easily as pick a pocket. Scotchmen, who, in their country's right, possess the gift of second sight, who, when their barren heaths they quit, sure argument of prudent wit, which reputation to maintain, they never venture back again, by lies prophetic heap up riches, and boast the luxury of breeches. Amongst the rest, in former years, Campbell, illustrious name, appears, great hero of futurity, who, blind, could everything foresee, who, dumb, could everything foretell, who, fate with equity to sell, always dealt out the will of heaven, according to what price was given. Of Scottish race, in Highlands born, possessed with native pride and scorn, he hither came, by custom led, to curse the hands which gave him bread. With want of truth, and want of sense, amply made up by impudence, a succedaneum which we find, in common use with all mankind, caressed and favoured too by those, whose heart with patriot feelings glows, who foolishly, wherever dispersed, still place their native country first, for Englishmen alone have sense, to give a stranger preference, whilst modest merit of their own, is left in poverty to groan. Campbell foretold just what he would, and left the stars to make it good, on whom he had impressed such awe, his dictates current passed for law, submissive, all his empire owned, no star durst smile, when Campbell frowned. This sage deceased, for all must die, and Campbell's no more safe than I, no more than I can guard the heart, when death shall hurl the fatal dart. Succeeded, ripe in art and years, another favourite of the spheres, another and another came, of equal skill and equal fame, as white each wand, as black each gown, as long each beard, as wise each frown, in everything so like, you'd swear, Campbell himself was sitting there, to all the happy art was known, to tell our fortunes, make their own. Seated in garret, for, you know, the nearer to the stars we go, the greater we esteem his art, fools, curious, flocked from every part, the rich, the poor, the maid, the married, and those who could not walk, were carried. The butler, hanging down his head, by chambermaid, or cookmaid led, inquires, if from his friend the moon, he has advice of pilfered spoon. The court-bred woman of condition, who, to approve her disposition, as much superior as her birth, to those composed of common earth, with double spirit must engage, in every folly of the age, the honourable arts would buy, to pack the cards, and cog a die. The hero who, for brawn and face, may claim right honourable place, amongst the chiefs of Butcherow, who might, some 30 years ago, if we may be allowed to guess, at his employment by his dress, put medicines off from cart or stage, the grand Toscano of the age, or might about the country go, high steward of a puppet show, steward and stewardship most meet, for all no puppets never eat, who would be thought, though, save the mark? That point is something in the dark, the man of honour, one like those, renowned in story, who loved blows, better than victuals, and would fight, merely for sport, from morn to night, who treads like mavers firm, whose tongue is with the triple thunder hung, who cries to fear, stand off aloof, and talks as he were cannon-proof, would be deemed ready, when you list, with sword and pistol, stick and fist, careless of points, balls, bruises, knocks, at once to fence, fire, cudgel, box, but at the same time bears about, within himself, some touch of doubt, of prudent doubt, which hints that fame is nothing but an empty name, that life is rightly understood by all to be a real good, that, even in a hero's heart, discretion is the better part, that this same honour may be won, and yet no kind of danger run, like drugger comes, that magic powers may ascertain his lucky hours, for at some hours the fickle dame, whom fortune properly we name, who never considers wrong or right, when wanted most, plays least in sight, and, like a modern court-bred jilt, leaves her chief favourites in a tilt. Some hours there are, when from the heart, courage into some other part, no matter wherefore, makes retreat, and fear usurps the vacant seat, whence, planet struck, we often find Stuarts and Sackvilles of mankind. Farther, he'd know, and by his art, a conjurer can that impart, whether politer it is reckoned, to have, or not to have, a second, to drag the friends in, or alone, to make the danger all their own, whether repletion is not bad, and fighters with full stomachs mad. Whether, before he seeks the plain, it were not well to breathe a vein, whether a gentle salivation, consistently with reputation, might not of precious use be found, not to prevent, indeed, a wound, but to prevent the consequence, which oftentimes arises thence, those fevers, which the patient urge on, to gates of death, by help of surgeon, whether a wind at east or west, is for green wounds accounted best, whether, was he to choose, his mouth should point towards the north or south, whether more safely he might use, on these occasions, pumps or shoes, whether it better is to fight, by sunshine or by candlelight, or, lest a candle should appear too mean to shine in such a sphere, for who could of a candle tell, to light a hero into hell, and, lest the sun should partial rise, to dazzle one or the other's eyes, or one or the other's brains to scorch, might not Dame Luna hold a torch? These points with dignity discussed, and gravely fixed, a task which must require no little time and pains, to make our hearts friends with our brains, the man of war would next engage, the kind assistance of the sage, some previous method to direct, which should make these of none effect. Could he not, from the mystic school of art, produce some sacred rule, by which a knowledge might be got, whether men valiant were, or not, so he that challenges might write, only to those who would not fight? Or could he not some way dispense, by help of which, without offence, to honor, whose nice nature's such, she scarce endures the slightest touch, when he, for want of the other rule, mistakes his man, and, like a fool, with some vain fighting blade gets in, he fairly may get out again? Or should some demon lay a scheme, to drive him to the last extreme, so that he must confess his fears, in mercy to his nose and ears, and like a prudent recreant knight, rather do anything than fight, could he not some expedient buy, to keep his shame from public eye? For well he held, and, men review, 9 in 10 hold the maxim too, that honor's like a maidenhead, which, if in private brought to bed, is none the worse, but walks the town, never lost, until the loss be known. The parson, too, for now and then, parsons are just like other men, and here and there a grave divine, has passions such as yours and mine, burning with holy lust to know, when fate preferment will bestow, afraid of detection, not of sin, with circumspection sneaking in, to conjurer, as he does to whore, through some by-alley or back door, with the same caution orthodox, consults the stars, and gets a pox. The citizen, in fraud grown old, who knows no deity but gold, worn out, and gasping now for breath, a medicine wants to keep off death, would know, if that he cannot have, what coins are current in the grave, if, when the stocks, which, by his power, would rise or fall in half an hour, for, though unthought of and unseen, he worked the springs behind the screen, by his directions came about, and rose to par, he should sell out, whether he safely might, or no, replace it in the funds below? By all addressed, believed, and paid, many pursued the thriving trade, and, great in reputation grown, successive held the magic throne. Favored by every darling passion, the love of novelty and fashion, ambition, avarice, lust, and pride, riches poured in on every side. But when the prudent laws thought fit, to curb this insolence of wit, when senates wisely had provided, decreed, enacted, and decided, that no such vile and upstart elves should have more knowledge than themselves, when fines and penalties were laid, to stop the progress of the trade, and stars no longer could dispense, with honor, further influence, and wizards, which must be confessed, was of more force than all the rest, no certain way to tell had got, which were informers, and which not, affrighted sages were, perforce, obliged to steer some other course. By various ways, these sons of chance, their fortunes labored to advance, well knowing, by unerring rules, knaves starve not in the land of fools. Some, with high titles and degrees, which wise men borrow when they please, without or trouble, or expense, physicians instantly commence, and proudly boast an equal skill, with those who claim the right to kill. Others about the country roam, for not one thought of going home, with pistol and adopted leg, prepared at once to rob or beg. Some, the more subtle of their race, who felt some touch of coward grace, who Tyburn to avoid had wit, but never feared deserving it, came to their brother Smollett's aid, and carried on the critic trade. Attached to letters and the muse, some verses wrote, and some wrote news, those each revolving month are seen, the heroes of a magazine, these, every morning, great appear, in ledger, or in gazetteer, spreading the facades of the day, by turns for Faden and for Say. Like Swiss, their force is always laid, on that side where they best are paid, hence mighty prodigies arise, and daily monsters strike our eyes, wonders, to propagate the trade, more strange than ever Baker made, are hawked about from street to street, and fools believe, whilst liars eat. Now armies in the air engage, to fright a superstitious age, now comets through the ether range, in governments portending change, now rivers to the ocean fly, so quick, they leave their channels dry, now monstrous whales on Lambeth shore, drink the Thames dry, and thirst for more, and every now and then appears, an Irish savage, numbering years, more than those happy sages could, who drew their breath before the flood. Now, to the wonder of all people, a church is left without a steeple now is left in lurch, and mourns departure of the church, which, borne on wings of mighty wind, removed a furlong off we find, now, wrath on cattle to discharge, hailstones as deadly fall, and large, as those which were on Egypt sent, at once their crime and punishment, or those which, as the prophet writes, fell on the necks of Amorites, when, struck with wonder and amaze, the sun, suspended, stayed to gaze, and, from her duty longer kept, in Ajalon his sister slept. But if such things no more engage the taste of a politer age, to help them out in time of need, another Tofts must rabbits breed. Each pregnant female trembling hears, and, overcome with spleen and fears, consults her faithful glass no more, but, madly bounding over the floor, feels hairs all over her body grow, by fancy turned into a doe. Now, to promote their private ends, nature her usual course suspends, and varies from the stated plan, observed ever since the world began. Bodies which foolishly we thought, by custom's servile maxims taught, needed a regular supply, and without nourishment must die, with craving appetites, and sense of hunger easily dispense, and, pliant to their wondrous skill, are taught, like watches, to stand still, uninjured, for a month or more, then go on as they did before. The novel takes, the tale succeeds, amply supplies its author's needs, and Betty Canning is at least, with Gascoigne's help, a 6 months' feast. Whilst, in contempt of all our pains, the tyrant superstition reigns, imperious in the heart of man, and warps his thoughts from nature's plan, whilst fond credulity, who never the weight of wholesome doubts could bear, to reason and herself unjust, takes all things blindly upon trust, whilst curiosity, whose rage no mercy shows to sex or age, must be indulged at the expense of judgment, truth, and common sense. Impostures cannot but prevail, and when old miracles grow stale, jugglers will still the art pursue, and entertain the world with new. For them, obedient to their will, and trembling at their mighty skill, sad spirits, summoned from the tomb, glide, glaring ghastly, through the gloom, in all the usual pomp of storms, in horrid customary forms, a wolf, a bear, a horse, an ape, as fear and fancy give them shape, tormented with despair and pain, they roar, they yell, and clank the chain. Folly and guilt, for guilt, however, the face of courage it may wear, is still a coward at the heart, at fear-created phantoms start. The priest that very word implies, that is both innocent and wise, yet fears to travel in the dark, unless escorted by his clerk. But let not every bungler deem too lightly of so deep a scheme, for reputation of the art, each ghost must act a proper part, observe decorum's needful grace, and keep the laws of time and place, must change, with happy variation, his manners with his situation. What in the country might pass down, would be impertinent in town. No spirit of discretion here can think of breeding or unfear, it will serve the purpose more by half, to make the congregation laugh. We want no ensigns of surprise, lock stiff with gore and saucer eyes, give us an entertaining sprite, gentle, familiar, and polite, one who appears in such a form, as might an holy hermit warm, or who on former schemes refines, and only talks by sounds and signs, who will not to the eye appear, but pays her visits to the ear, and knocks so gently, it would not fright a lady in the darkest night. Such is our Fanny, whose goodwill, which cannot in the grave lie still, brings her on earth to entertain her friends and lovers in Cock Lane. The Ghost. Book 2. By Charles Churchill. A sacred standard rule we find, by poets held time out of mind, to offer at Apollo's shrine, and call on one, or all the nine. This custom, through a bigot zeal, which moderns of fine taste must feel, for those who wrote in days of yore, adopted stands, like many more, though every cause which then conspired, to make it practiced and admired, yielding to time's destructive course, for ages past hath lost its force. With ancient bards, an invocation was a true act of adoration, of worship an essential part, and not a formal piece of art, of paltry reading a parade, a dull solemnity in trade, a pious fever, taught to burn, an hour or two, to serve a turn. They talk not of Castalian springs, by way of saying pretty things, as we dress out our flimsy rhymes. It was the religion of the times, and they believed that holy stream, with greater force made fancy teem, reckoned by all a true specific, to make the barren brain prolific. Thus Romish Church, a scheme which bears not half so much excuse as theirs, since faith implicitly hath taught her, reveres the force of holy water. The pagan system, whether true or false, its strength, like buildings, drew from many parts disposed to bear, in one great whole, their proper share. Each god of eminent degree, to some vast beam compared might be, each godling was a peg, or rather, a cramp, to keep the beams together, and man as safely might pretend, from Jove the thunderbolt to rend, as with an impious pride aspire, to rob Apollo of his lyre. With settled faith and pious awe, established by the voice of law, then poets to the Muses came, and from their altars caught the flame. Genius, with Phoebus for his guide, the Muse ascending by his side, with towering pinions dared to soar, where I could scarcely strain before. But why should we, who cannot feel, these glowings of a pagan zeal, that wild enthusiastic force, by which, above her common course, nature, in ecstasy upborne, look down on earthly things with scorn, who have no more regard, 'tis known, for their religion than our own, and feel not half so fierce a flame, at Clio's as at Fisher's name, who know these boasted sacred streams, were mere romantic, idle dreams, that Thames has waters clear as those, which on the top of Pindus rose, and that, the fancy to refine, waters not half so good as wine, who know, if profit strikes our eye, should we drink Helicon quite dry, the whole fountain would not thither lead, so soon as one poor jug from Tweed, who, if to raise poetic fire, the power of beauty we require, in any public place can view, more than the Grecians ever knew. If wit into the scale is thrown, can boast a Lennox of our own, why should we servile customs choose, and court an antiquated muse? No matter why to ask a reason, in pedant bigotry is treason. In the broad, beaten turnpike road, of hackneyed panegyric ode, no modern poet dares to ride, without Apollo by his side, nor in a sonnet take the air, unless his lady Muse be there. She, from some amaranthine grove, where little loves and graces rove, the laurel to my lord must bear, or garlands make for horse to wear. She, with soft elegiac verse, must grace some mighty villain's hearse, or for some infant, doomed by fate, to wallow in a large estate, with rhymes the cradle must adorn, to tell the world a fool is born. Since then our critic lords expect, no hardy poet should reject, established maxims, or presume, to place much better in their room, by nature fearful, I submit, and in this dearth of sense and wit, with nothing done, and little said, by wild excursive fancy led, into a second book thus far, like some unwary traveller, whom varied scenes of wood and lawn, with treacherous delight, have drawn, deluded from his purposed way, whom every step leads more astray, who, gazing round, can nowhere spy, or house, or friendly cottage nigh, and resolution seems to lack, to venture forward, or go back, invoke some goddess to descend, and help me to my journey's end, though conscious arrow all the while, hears the petition with a smile, before the glass her charms unfolds, and in herself my muse beholds. Truth, goddess of celestial birth, but little loved or known on earth, whose power but seldom rules the heart, whose name, with hypercritic art, an errant stalking horse is made, a snug pretence to drive a trade, an instrument, convenient grown, to plant more firmly falsehoods thrown, as rebels varnish over their cause, with specious colouring of laws, and pious traitors draw the knife, in the king's name against his life, whether, from cities far away, where fraud and falsehood scorn thy sway, the faithful nymphs and shepherds' pride, with love and virtue by thy side, your hours in harmless joys are spent, amongst the children of content, or, fond of gaiety and sport, you tread the round of England's court, however my lord may frowning go, and treat the stranger as a foe, sure to be found a welcome guest, in George's and in Charlotte's breast, if, in the giddy hours of youth, my constant soul adhered to truth, if, from the time I first wrote man, I still pursued thy sacred plan, tempted by interest in vain, to wear mean falsehood's golden chain, if, for a season drawn away, starting from virtue's path astray, all low disguise I scorned to try, and dared to sin, but not to lie, hither, oh, hither condescend, eternal truth, thy steps to bend, and favour him, who, every hour, confesses and obeys thy power. But come not with that easy mien, by which you won the lively Dean, nor yet assume that strumpet air, which Rabelais taught thee first to wear, nor yet that arch ambiguous face, which with Cervantes gave thee grace, but come in sacred vesture clad, solemnly dull, and truly sad. Far from thy seemly matron train, be idiot mirth, and laughter vain. For wit and humour, which pretend, at once to please us and amend, they are not for my present turn, let them remain in France with Sterne. Of noblest city parents born, whom wealth and dignities adorn, who still one constant tenor keep, not quite awake, nor quite asleep, with thee let formal dullness come, and deep attention, ever dumb, who on her lips her finger lays, whilst every circumstance she weighs, whose downcast eye is often found, bent without motion to the ground, or, to some outward thing confined, remits no image to the mind, no pregnant mark of meaning bears, but, stupid, without vision stares. Thy steps let gravity attend, wisdom's and truth's unerring friend, for one may see with half an eye, that gravity can never lie, and his arched brow, pulled over his eyes, with solemn proof proclaims him wise. Free from all wiggeries and sports, the produce of luxurious courts, where sloth and lust enervate youth, come thou, a downright city truth, the city, which we ever find, a sober pattern for mankind, where man, in equilibrium hung, is seldom old, and never young, and, from the cradle to the grave, not virtue's friend nor vice's slave, as dancers on the wire we spy, hanging between the earth and sky. She comes, I see her from afar, bending her course to Temple Bar, all sage and silent is her train, deportment grave, and garments plain, such as may suit a parson's wear, and fit the headpiece of a mayor. By truth inspired, our Bacon's force, opened a way to learning's source, Boyle through the works of nature ran, and Newton, something more than man, dived into nature's hidden springs, laid bare the principles of things, above the earth our spirits bore, and gave us worlds unknown before. By truth inspired, when lauders spite, over Milton east the veil of night, Douglas arose, and through the maze of intricate and winding ways, came where the subtle traitor lay, and dragged him, trembling, to the day, whilst he, oh, shame to noblest parts, dishonour to the liberal arts, to traffic in so vile a scheme. Whilst he, our lettered Polypheme, who had confederate forces joined, like a base coward skulked behind. By truth inspired, our critics go, to track Fingal in Highland snow, to form their own and others' creed, from manuscripts they cannot read. By truth inspired, we numbers see, of each profession and degree, gentle and simple, lord and sit, wit without wealth, wealth without wit, when Punch and Sheridan have done, to Fanny's ghostly lectures run. By truth and Fanny now inspired, I feel my glowing bosom fired, desire beats high in every vein, to sing the spirit of Cock Lane, to tell, just as the measure flows, in halting rhyme, half verse, half prose, with more than mortal arts endued, how she united force withstood, and proudly gave a brave defiance, to wit and dullness in alliance. This apparition, with relation, to ancient modes of derivation, this we may properly so call, although it never appears at all, as by the way of innuendo, Lucas is made non-lucendo superior to the vulgar mode, nobly disdains that servile road, which coward ghosts, as it appears, have walked in full 5,000 years. And, for restraint too mighty grown, strikes out a method of her own. Others may meanly start away, awed by the herald of the day, with faculties too weak to bear the freshness of the morning air, may vanish with the melting gloom, and glide in silence to the tomb. She dares the sun's most piercing light, and knocks by day as well as night. Others, with mean and partial view, their visits pay to one or two. She, in great reputation grown, keeps the best company in town. Our active enterprising ghost, as large and splendid routes can boast, as those which, raised by pride's command, block up the passage through the Strand. Great adepts in the fighting trade, who served their time on the parade, she saints, who, true to pleasure's plan, talk about God, and lust for man, wits, who believe nor God, nor ghost, and fools who worship every post, cowards, whose lips with war are hung, men truly brave, who hold their tongue, courtiers, who laugh they know not why, and cits, who for the same cause cry, the canting tabernacle brother, for one rogue still suspects another, ladies, who to a spirit fly, rather than with their husbands lie, lords, who as chastely pass their lives, with other women as their wives, proud of their intellects and clothes, physicians, lawyers, parsons, beaux, and, truant from their desks and shops, spruce temple clerks and prentice fops, to Fanny come, with the same view, to find her false, or find her true. Hark! Something creeps about the house. Is it a spirit, or a mouse? Hark! Something scratches round the room. A cat, a rat, a stubbed birch broom. Hark! On the wainscot now it knocks. If thou art a ghost, cried orthodox, with that affected solemn air, which hypocrites delight to wear, and all those forms of consequence, which fools adopt instead of sense. If thou art a ghost, who from the tomb stalks sadly silent through this gloom, in breach of nature's stated laws, for good, or bad, or for no cause, give now 9 knocks, like priests of old, 9 we a sacred number hold. Pshaw, cried Profound, a man of parts, deep read in all the curious arts, who to their hidden springs had traced the force of numbers, rightly placed. As to the number, you are right. As to the form, mistaken quite. What's 9? Your adepts all agree, the virtue lies in 3 times 3. He said, no need to say it twice, for thrice she knocked, and thrice, and thrice. The crowd, confounded and amazed, in silence at each other gazed. From Celia's hand the snuff-box fell. Tinsel, who ogled with the bell, to pick it up attempts in vain. He stoops, but cannot rise again. Emain Pomposo was not heard, to import one crabbed foreign word. Fear seizes heroes, fools, and wits, and plausible his prayers forgets. At length, as people just awake, into wild dissonance they break. All talked at once, but not a word was understood or plainly heard. Such is the noise of chattering geese, slow sailing on the summer breeze. Such is the language discord speaks, in Welsh women over beds of leeks, such the confused and horrid sounds, of Irish in potato grounds. But tired, for even CS tongue, is not on iron hinges hung, fear and confusion sound retreat, reason and order take their seat. The fact, confirmed beyond all doubt, they now would find the causes out. For this a sacred rule we find, among the nicest of mankind, which never might exception brook, from Hobbes even down to Bolingbroke, to doubt of facts, however true, unless they know the causes too. Trifle, of whom 'twas hard to tell, when he intended ill or well, who, to prevent all further pother, probably meant nor one, nor the other, who to be silent always loat, would speak on either side, or both, who, led away by love of fame, if any new idea came, whatever it made for, always said it, not with an eye to truth, but credit, for orators professed, 'tis known, talk not for our sake, but their own, who always showed his talents best, when serious things were turned to jest, and, under much impertinence, possessed no common share of sense, who could deceive the flying hours, with chat on butterflies and flowers, could talk of powder, patches, paint, with the same zeal as of a saint, could prove a sibyl brighter far than Venus or the morning star, whilst something still so gay, so new, the smile of approbation drew, and females eyed the charming man, whilst their hearts fluttered with their fan. Trifle, who would by no means miss an opportunity like this, proceeding on his usual plan, smiled, stroked his chin, and thus began, with shears or scissors, sword or knife, when the fates cut the thread of life, for if we to the grave are sent, no matter with what instrument, the body in some lonely spot, on dunghill vile, is laid to rot, or sleep among more holy dead, with prayers irreverently read, the soul is sent where fate ordains, to reap rewards, to suffer pains. The virtuous to those mansions go, where pleasures embittered flow, where, leading up a jocund band, vigor and youth dance hand in hand, whilst Zephyr, with harmonious gales, pipes softest music through the vales, and Spring and Flora, gaily crowned, with velvet carpet spread the ground, with livelier blush where roses bloom, and every shrub expires perfume, where crystal streams meandering glide, where warbling flows the amber tide, where other suns dart brighter beams, and light through purer ether streams. Far other seats, far different state, the sons of wickedness await. Justice, not that old hag I mean, who's nightly in the garden seen, who lets no spark of mercy rise, for crimes, by which men lose their eyes, nor her who, with an equal hand, weighs tea and sugar in the strand, nor her who, by the world deemed wise, deaf to the widow's piercing cries, steeled against the starving orphan's tears, on pawns her base tribunal rears, but her who after death presides, whom sacred truth unerring guides, who, free from partial influence, nor sinks nor raises evidence, before whom nothing's in the dark, who takes no bribe, and keeps no clerk, justice, with equal scale below, in due proportion weighs out woe, and always with such lucky aim, knows punishments so fit to frame, that she augments their grief and pain, leaving no reason to complain. Old maids and rakes are joined together, coquettes and prudes, like April weather. Wit's forced to chum with common sense, and lust is yoked to impotence. Professors, justice so decreed, unpaid, must constant lectures read, on earth it often doth befall, they are paid, and never read at all. Parsons must practice what they teach, and bishops are compelled to preach. She who on earth was nice and prim, of delicacy full, and whim, whose tender nature could not bear the rudeness of the churlish air, is doomed to mortify her pride, the change of weather to abide, and sells, whilst tears with liquor mix, burnt brandy on the shore of Styx. Avaro, by long use grown bold, in every ill which brings him gold, who his Redeemer would pull down, and sell his God for half a crown, who, if some blockhead should be willing to lend him on his soul a shilling, a well-made bargain would esteem it, and have more sense than to redeem it. Justice shall in those shades confine, to drudge for Plutus in the mine, all the day long to toil and roar, and, cursing, work the stubborn oar, for coxcombs here, who have no brains, without a sixpence for his pains. Thence, with each due return of night, compelled, the tall, thin, half-starved sprite, shall earth revisit, and survey the place where once his treasure lay, shall view the stall where holy pride, with lettered ignorance allied, once hailed him mighty and adored, descended to another lord. Then shall he, screaming, pierce the air, hang his lank jaws, and scowl despair. Then shall he ban at heaven's decrees, and, howling, sink to hell for ease. Those who on earth through life have passed, with equal pace from first to last, nor vexed with passions nor with spleen, insipid, easy, and serene, whose heads were made too weak to bear the weight of business, or of care, who, without merit, without crime, contrive to while away their time, nor good nor bad, nor fools nor wits, mild justice, with a smile, permits, still to pursue their darling plan, and find amusement how they can. The beau, in gaudiest plumage dressed, with lucky fancy over the rest, of air a curious mantle throws, and chats among his brother beaux, or, if the weather's fine and clear, no sign of rain or tempest near, encouraged by the cloudless day, like gilded butterflies at play, so lively all, so gay, so brisk, in air they flutter, float, and frisk. The belle, what mortal doth not know, belles after death admire a beau. With happy grace renews her art, to trap the coxcomb's wandering heart, and, after death as whilst they live, a heart is all which beau can give. In some still, solemn, sacred shade, behold a group of authors laid. Newspaper wits, and sonneteers, gentlemen bards, and rhyming peers, biographers, whose wondrous worth is scarce remembered now on earth, whom Fielding's humour led astray, and plaintive fops, debauched by Gray, all sit together in a ring, and laugh and prattle, write and sing. On his own works, with laurel crowned, neatly and elegantly bound, for this is one of many rules, with writing lords, and laureate fools, and which for ever must succeed, with other lords who cannot read, however destitute of wit, to make their works for bookcase fit, acknowledged master of those seats, Gibber his birthday odes repeats. With triumph now possess that seat, with triumph now thy odes repeat, unrivalled vigils proudly keep, whilst every hearer's lulled to sleep. But know, illustrious bard, when fate, which still pursues thy name with hate, the regal laurel blasts, which now blooms on the placid Whitehead's brow, low must descend thy pride and fame, and Cibber's be the second name. Here trifle coughed, for coughing still bears witness of the speaker's skill, a necessary piece of art, of rhetoric an essential part, and adepts in the speaking trade keep a cough by them ready-made, which they successfully dispense, when at a loss for words or sense. Here trifle coughed, here paused, but while he strove to recollect his smile, that happy engine of his art, which triumphed over the female heart, credulity, the child of folly, begot on cloistered melancholy, who heard, with grief, the florid fool turn sacred things to ridicule, and saw him, led by whim away, still further from the subject stray, just in the happy nick, aloud, in shape of more, addressed the crowd, were we with patience here to sit, dupes to the impertinence of wit, till trifle his harangue should end, a Greenland night we might attend, whilst he, with fluency of speech, would various mighty nothings teach. Here trifle, sternly looking down, gravely endeavoured at a frown, but nature unawares stepped in, and, mocking, turned it to a grin, and when, in fancy's chariot hurled, we had been carried round the world, involved in error still and doubt, he'd leave us where we first set out. Thus soldiers, in whose exercise, material use with grandeur vies, lift up their legs with mighty pain, only to set them down again. Believe ye not, yes, all, I see, in sound belief concur with me, that Providence, for worthy ends, to us unknown, this Spirit sends. Though speechless lay the trembling tongue, your faith was on your features hung, your faith I in your eyes could see, when all were pale and stared like me. But scruples to prevent, and root out every shadow of dispute, Pomposo, plausible, and I, with Fanny, have agreed to try a deep concerted scheme this night, to fix or to destroy her quite. If it be true, before we've done, we'll make it glaring as the sun. If it be false, admit no doubt, ere morning's dawn we'll find it out. Into the vaulted womb of death, where Fanny now, deprived of breath, lies festering, whilst her troubled sprite adds horror to the gloom of night, will we descend, and bring from thence proofs of such force to common sense. Vain triflers shall no more deceive, and atheists tremble and believe. He said, and ceased. The chamber rung with due applause from every tongue. The mingled sound, now let me see, something by way of simile. Was it more like Strymonian cranes, or winds, low murmuring, when it rains? Or drowsy hum of clustering bees, or the hoarse roar of angry seas? Or, still to heighten and explain, for else our simile is vain, shall we declare it like all four, a scream, a murmur, hum, and roar? Let fancy now, in awful state, present this great triumvirate, a method which received we find, in other cases, by mankind, elected with a joint consent, all fools in town to represent. The clock strikes 12 more starts and swears. In oaths, we know, as well as prayers, religion lies, and a church brother may use at will, or one, or the other, plausible from his cassock drew, a holy manual, seeming new, a book it was of private prayer, but not a pin the worse for wear, for, as we by the by may say, none but small saints in private pray. Religion, fairest maid on earth, as meek as good, who drew her birth from that blessed union, when in heaven pleasure was bride to virtue given. Religion, ever pleased to pray, possessed the precious gift one day. Hypocrisy, of cunning born, crept in and stole it ere the morn. Whitefield, that greatest of all saints, who always prays and never faints, whom she to her own brothers bore, rapine and lust, on Severn's shore, received it from the squinting dame. From him to plausible it came, who, with unusual care oppressed, now, trembling, pulled it from his breast. Doubts in his boding heart arise, and fancied spectres blast his eyes. Devotion springs from abject fear, and stamps his prayers for once sincere. Pomposo, insolent and loud, vain idol of a scribbling crowd, whose very name inspires an awe, whose every word is sense and law, for what his greatness hath decreed, like laws of Persia and of Mede, sacred through all the realm of wit, must never of repeal admit, who, cursing flattery, is the tool of every fawning, flattering fool, who wit with jealous eye surveys, and sickens at another's praise, who, proudly seized of learning's throne, now damns all learning but his own, who scorns those common wares to trade in, reasoning, convincing, and persuading, but makes each sentence current pass, with puppy, coxcomb, scoundrel, ass. For 'tis with him a certain rule, the folly's proved when he calls fool, who, to increase his native strength, draws words 6 syllables in length, with which, assisted with a frown, by way of club, he knocks us down, who above the vulgar dares to rise, and sense of decency defies, for this same decency is made only for bunglers in the trade, and, like the cobweb laws, is still broke through by great ones when they will. Pomposo, with strong sense applied, supported, and confirmed by pride, his comrades' terrors to beguile, a grin horribly a ghastly smile, features so horrid, were it light, would put the devil himself to flight. Such were the 3 in name and worth, whom zeal and judgment singled forth, to try the sprite on reason's plan, whether it was of God or man. Dark was the night, it was that hour, when terror reigns in fullest power, when, as the learned of old have said, the yawning grave gives up her dead, when murder, rapine by her side, stalks over the earth with giant stride. Our Quixotes, for that night of old, was not in truth by half so bold, though reason at the same time cries, our Quixotes are not half so wise, since they, with other follies, boast an expedition against a ghost, through the dull deep surrounding gloom, in close array, towards Fanny's tomb, adventured forth, caution before, with heedful step, the lantern bore, pointing at graves, and in the rear, trembling, and talking loud, went fear. The churchyard teemed the unsettled ground, as in an age, shook around, while, in some dreary vault confined, or riding on the hollow wind, horror, which turns the heart to stone, in dreadful sounds was heard to groan. All staring, wild, and out of breath, at length they reached the place of death. A vault it was, long time applied, to hold the last remains of pride, no beggar there, of humble race, and humble fortunes, finds a place, to rest in pomp as well as ease, the only ways to pay the fees. Fools, rogues, and whores, if rich and great, proud even in death, here rot in state. No thieves disrobe the well-dressed dead, no plumbers steal the sacred lead, quiet and safe the bodies lie, no sextons sell, no surgeons buy. Thrice, each the ponderous key applied, and thrice to turn it vainly tried, till taught by prudence to unite, and straining with collected might, the stubborn wards resist no more, but open flies the growling door. 3 paces back they fell amazed, like statues stood, like madmen gazed, the frighted blood forsakes the face, and seeks the heart with quicker pace, the throbbing heart its fear declares, and upright stand the bristled hairs, the head in wild distraction swims, cold sweats bedew the trembling limbs, nature, whilst fears her bosom chill, suspends her powers, and life stands still. Thus had they stood till now, but shame, an useful, though neglected dame, by heaven designed the friend of man, though we degrade her all we can, and strive, as our first proof of wit, her name and nature to forget, came to their aid in happy hour, and with a wand of mighty power, struck on their hearts, vain fears subside, and, baffled, leave the field to pride. Shall they, forbid it, fame, shall they, the dictates of vile pair obey? Shall they, the idols of the town, to bugbears, fancy-formed, bow down? Shall they, who greatest zeal expressed, and undertook for all the rest, whose matchless courage all admire, inglorious from the task retire? How would the wicked ones rejoice, and infidels exalt their voice, if more implausible were found, by shadows awed, to quit their ground? How would fools laugh, should it appear, Pomposo was the slave of fear? Perish the thought! Though to our eyes, in all its terrors, hell should rise, though 1,000 ghosts, in dread array, with glaring eyeballs, cross our way, though caution, trembling, stands aloof, still we will on, and dare the proof. They said, and, without further halt, dauntless marched onward to the vault. What mortal men, who ever drew breath, shall break into the house of death, with foot unhallowed, and from thence, the mysteries of that state dispense, unless they, with due rites, prepare, their weaker sense such sights to bear, and gain permission from the state, on earth their journal to relate. Poets themselves, without a crime, cannot attempt it even in rhyme, but always, on such grand occasion, prepare a solemn invocation, a posy for grim Pluto weave, and in smooth numbers ask his leave. But why this caution? Why prepare rites, needless now? For thrice in air, the spirit of the night hath sneezed, and thrice hath clapped his wings, well pleased. Descend then, truth, and guard thy side, my muse, my patroness, and guide. Let others at invention aim, and seek by falsities for fame. Our story wants not, at this time, flounces and furbelows in rhyme. Relate plain facts, be brief and bold, and let the poets, famed of old, seek, whilst our artless tale we tell, in vain to find a parallel. Silent all 3 went in, about, all 3 turned, silent, and came out. The Ghost. Book 3. By Charles Churchill. It was the hour, when housewife morn, with pearl and linen hangs each thorn, when happy bards, who can regale their muse with country air and ale, ramble afield to brooks and bowers, to pick up sentiments and flowers, when dogs and squires from kennel fly, and hogs and farmers quit their sty, when my lord rises to the chase, and brawny chaplain takes his place. These images, or bad, or good, if they are rightly understood, sagacious readers must allow, proclaim us in the country now, for observations mostly rise from objects just before our eyes, and every lord, in critic wit, can tell you where the piece was writ, can point out, as he goes along, and who shall dare to say he's wrong? Whether the warmth, for bards, we know, at present never more than glow, was in the town or country court, by the peculiar turn of thought. It was the hour, though critics frown, we now declare ourselves in town, nor will a moment's pause allow, for finding when we came, or how. The man who deals in humble prose, tied down by rule and method goes, but they who court the vigorous muse, their carriage have a right to choose. Free as the air, and unconfined, swift as the motions of the mind, the poet darts from place to place, and instant bounds over time and space. Nature, whilst blended fire and skill, inflame our passions to his will, smiles at her violated laws, and crowns his daring with applause. Should there be still some rigid few, who keep propriety in view, whose heads turn round, and cannot bear this whirling passage through the air, free leave have such at home to sit, and write a regimen for wit, to clip our pinions let them try, not having heart themselves to fly. It was the hour when devotees breathe pious curses on their knees, when they with prayers the day begin, to sanctify a night of sin, when rogues of modesty, who roam under the veil of night, sneak home, that, free from all restraint and awe, just to the windward of the law, less modest rogues their tricks may play, and plunder in the face of day. But hold, whilst thus we play the fool, in bold contempt of every rule, things of no consequence expressing, describing now, and now digressing, to the discredit of our skill, the main concern is standing still. In plays, indeed, when storms of rage, tempestuous in the soul engage, or when the spirits, weak and low, are sunk in deep distress and woe, with strict propriety we hear description stealing on the ear, and put off feeling half an hour, to thatch a cot, or paint a flower. But in these serious works, designed to mend the morals of mankind, we must forever be disgraced, with all the nicer sons of taste, if once, the shadow to pursue, we let the substance out of view. Our means must uniformly tend, in due proportion to their end, and every passage aptly join, to bring about the one design. Our friends themselves cannot admit this rambling, wild, digressive wit, no, not those very friends, who found their credit on the selfsame ground. Peace, my good grumbling sir, for once, sunk in the solemn, formal dunce, this coxcomb shall your fears beguile, we will be dull that you may smile. Come, method, come in all thy pride, dullness and Whitehead by thy side, dullness and method still are one, and Whitehead is their darling son, not he, whose pen, above control, struck terror to the guilty soul, made folly tremble through her state, and villains blush at being great, whilst he himself, with steady face, disdaining modesty and grace, could blunder on through thick and thin, through every mean and servile sin, yet swear by Philip and by Paul, he nobly scorned to blush at all, but he who in the laureate chair, by grace, not merit, planted there, in awkward pomp is seen to sit, and by his patent proves his wit, for favours of the great, we know, can wit as well as rank bestow, and they who, without one pretension, can get for fools a place or pension, must able be supposed, of course, if reason is allowed due force, to give such qualities and grace, as may equip them for the place. But he who measures as he goes, a mongrel kind of tinkling prose, and is too frugal to dispense, at once, both poetry and sense, who, from amidst his slumbering guards, deals out a charge to subject bards, where couplets after couplets creep, propitious to the reign of sleep, yet every word imprints an awe, and all his dictates pass for law, with bow, who simper all around, and bells, who dial every sound, for in all things of this relation, men mostly judge from situation, nor in 1,000 find we one, who really weighs what's said or done, they deal out censure, or give credit, merely from him who did or said it. But he who, happily serene, means nothing, yet would seem to mean, who rules and cautions can dispense, with all that humble insolence, which impudence in vain would teach, and none but modest men can reach, who adds to sentiments the grace, of always being out of place, and drawls out morals with an air, a gentleman would blush to wear, who, on the chestiest, simplest plan, as chaste, as simple, as the man, without or character, or plot, nature unknown, and art forgot, can, with much raking of the brains, and years consumed in lettered pains, a heap of words together lay, and, smirking, call the thing a play, who, champion sworn in virtue's cause, against vice his tiny bodkin draws, but to no part of prudence stranger, first blunts the point for fear of danger. So nurses sage, as caution works, when children first use knives and forks, for fear of mischief, it is known, to others' fingers or their own, to take the edge off wisely choose, though the same stroke takes off the use. Thee, Whitehead, thee I now invoke, sworn foe to satire's generous stroke, which makes unwilling conscience feel, and wounds, but only wounds to heal. Good-natured, easy creature, mild, and gentle as a newborn child, thy heart would never once admit, even wholesome rigour to thy wit, thy head, if conscience should comply, its kind assistance would deny, and lend thee neither force nor art, to drive it onward to the heart. Oh, may thy sacred power control, bark fiercer working of my soul, damp every spark of genuine fire, and languors, like thine own, inspire. Tried be each thought, and every line, as moral and as dull as thine. Poised in mid-air, it matters not, to ascertain the very spot, nor yet to give you a relation, how it eluded gravitation, hung a watchtower, by Vulcan planned, with such rare skill, by Jove's command, that every word which, whispered here, scarce vibrates to the neighbor ear, on the still bosom of the air, is born and heard distinctly there, the palace of an ancient dame, whom men as well as gods call fame. A prattling gossip, on whose tongue, proof of perpetual motion hung, whose lungs in strength all lungs surpass, like her own trumpet made of brass, who with 100 pair of eyes, the vain attacks of sleep defies, who with 100 pair of wings, news from the furthest quarters brings, sees, hears, and tells, untold before, all that she knows and 10 times more. Not all the virtues which we find, concentered in a hunter's mind, can make her spare the rancorous tale, if in one point she chance to fail, or if, once in 1,000 years, a perfect character appears, such as of late with joy and pride, my soul possessed, ere arrow died, or such as, envy must allow, the world enjoys in hunter now, this hag, who aims at all alike, at virtues even like theirs will strike, and make faults in the way of trade, when she can't find them ready-made. All things she takes in, small and great, talks of a toy shop and a state, of wits and fools, of saints and kings, of garters, stars, and leading strings, of old lords fumbling for a clap, and young ones full of prayer and pap, of courts, of morals, and tie-wigs, of bears and sergeants dancing jigs, of grave professors at the bar, learning to thrum on the guitar, whilst laws are slubbered over in haste, and judgment sacrificed to taste, of whited sepulchres, lawn sleeves, and God's house made a den of thieves, of funeral pomps, where clamours hung, and fixed disgrace on every tongue, whilst sense and order blush to see, nobles without humanity, of coronations, where each heart, with honest raptures, bore a part, of city feasts, where elegance was proud her colours to advance, and gluttony, uncommon case, could only get the second place, of new raised pillars in the state, who must be good, as being great, of shoulders, on which honours sit, almost as clumsily as wit, of doughty knights, whom titles please, but not the payment of the fees, of lectures, whither every fool, in second childhood, goes to school, of greybeards, deaf to reason's call, from inn of court, or city hall, whom youthful appetites enslave, with one foot fairly in the grave, by help of crutch, a needful brother, learning of heart to dance with the other, of doctors regularly bred, to fill the mansions of the dead, of quacks, for quacks they must be still, who save when forms require to kill, who life, and health, and vigour give, to him, not one would wish to live, of artists who, with noblest view, disinterested plans pursue, for trembling worth the ladder raise, and mark out the ascent to praise, of arts and sciences, where meet, sublime, profound, and all complete, a set, whom at some fitter time, the muse shall consecrate in rhyme, who, humble artists to outdo, a far more liberal plan pursue, and let their well-judged premiums fall, on those who have no worth at all, of signpost exhibitions, raised, for laughter more than to be praised, though, by the way, we cannot see, why praise and laughter meant agree, where genuine humour runs to waste, and justly chides our want of taste, censured, like other things, though good, because they are not understood. To higher subjects now she soars, and talks of politics and whores, if to your nice and chaster ears, that term indelicate appears, Scripture politely shall refine, and melt it into concubine, in the same breath spreads Bourbon's league, and publishes the grand intrigue, in Brussels or our own Gazette, makes armies fight which never met, and circulates the pox or plague, to London, by the way of Hague, for all the lies which there appear, stamped with authority come here, borrows as freely from the gabble, of some rude leader of a rabble, or from the quaint harangues of those, who lead a nation by the nose, as from those storms which, void of art, burst from our honest patriot's heart, when eloquence and virtue, late, remark to live in mutual hate, fond of each other's friendship grown, claim every sentence for their own, and with an equal joy recites, parade amours and half-pay fights, performed by heroes of fair weather, merely by dint of lace and feather, as those rare acts which honour taught, our daring sons where Granby fought, or those which, with superior skill, Sackville achieved by standing still. This hag, the curious, if they please, may search, from earliest times to these, and poets they will always see, with gods and goddesses make free, treating them all, except the muse, as scarcely fit to wipe their shoes, who had beheld, from first to last, how our triumvirate had passed, night's dreadful interval, and heard, with strict attention, every word, soon as she saw return of light, on sounding pinions took her flight. Swift through the regions of the sky, above the reach of human eye, Onward she drove the furious blast, and rapid as a whirlwind passed, over countries, once the seats of taste, by time and ignorance laid waste, over lands, where former ages saw reason and truth the only law, where arts and arms, and public love, in generous emulation strove. Where kings were proud of legal sway, and subjects happy to obey, though now in slavery sunk, and broke, to superstition's galling yoke, of arts, of arms, no more they tell, or freedom, which with science fell, by tyrants awed, who never find the passage to their people's mind, to whom the joy was never known, of planting in the heart their throne, far from all prospect of relief, their hours in fruitless prayers and grief, for loss of blessings, they employ, which we unthankfully enjoy. Now is the time, had we the will, to amaze the reader with our skill, to pour out such a flood of knowledge, as might suffice for a whole college, whilst with a true poetic force, we traced the goddess in her course, sweetly describing, in our flight, each common and uncommon sight, making our journal gay and pleasant, with things long past, and things now present. Rivers once nymphs, a transformation, is mighty pretty in relation, from great authorities we know, will matter for a tale bestow, to make the observation clear, we give our friends an instance here. The day, that never is forgot, was very fine, but very hot, the nymph, another general rule, inflamed with heat, laid down to cool, her hair, we no exceptions find, waved careless, floating in the wind, her heaving breasts, like summer seas, seemed amorous of the playful breeze, should fond description tune our lays, in choicest accents to her praise, description we at last should find, baffled and weak, would halt behind. Nature had formed her to inspire, in every bosom soft desire, passions to raise, she could not feel, wounds to inflict, she would not heal. A god, his name is no great matter, perhaps a Jove, perhaps a satyr, raging with lust, a godlike flame, by chance, as usual, thither came, with gloating eye the fair one viewed, desired her first, and then pursued, she, for what other can she do? Must fly or how can he pursue? The muse, so custom hath decreed, now proves her spirit by her speed, nor must one limping line disgrace the life and vigor of the race. She runs, and he runs, till at length, quite destitute of breath and strength, to heaven, for there we all apply, for help, when there's no other nigh, she offers up her virgin prayer. Can virgins pray unpitied there? And when the god thinks he has caught her, slips through his hands and runs to water, becomes a stream, in which the poet, if he has any wit, may show it. A city once for power renowned, now levelled even to the ground. Beyond all doubt is a direction, to introduce some fine reflection. Ah, woeful me! Ah, woeful man! Ah, woeful all, do all we can. Who can on earthly things depend, from one to the other moment's end? Honor, wit, genius, wealth, and glory, good lack, are transitory, nothing is sure and stable found, the very earth itself turns round, monarchs, nay ministers, must die, must rot, must stink me. Why? Cities themselves in time decay, if cities thus are, well a day. If brick and mortar have an end, on what can flesh and blood depend? Ah, woeful me! Ah, woeful man! Ah, woeful all, do all we can. England, for that's at last the scene, though worlds on worlds should rise between, whither we must our course pursue, England should call into review, times long since past indeed, but not by Englishmen to be forgot, though England, once so dear to fame, sinks in Great Britain's dearer name. Here could we mention chiefs of old, in plain and rugged honour bold, to virtue kind, to vice severe, strangers to bribery and fear, who kept no wretched clans in awe, who never broke or warped the law, patriots, whom, in her better days, old Rome might have been proud to raise, who, steady to their country's claim, boldly stood up in freedom's name, even to the teeth of tyrant pride, and when they could no more, they died. There, striking contrast, might we place a servile, mean, degenerate race, hirelings, who valued naught but gold, by the best bidder bought and sold, traunts from honor's sacred laws, betrayers of their country's cause, the dupes of party, tools of power, slaves to the minion of an hour, lackeys, who watched a favorite's nod, and took a puppet for their god. Sincere and honest in our rhymes, how might we praise these happier times? How might the muse exalt her lays, and wanton in a monarch's praise? Tell of a prince, in England born, whose virtues England's crown adorn, in youth a pattern unto age, so chaste, so pious, and so sage, who, true to all those sacred bands, which private happiness demands, yet never lets them rise above the stronger ties of public love. With conscious pride see England stand, our holy charter in her hand, she waves it round, and over the isle, see liberty and courage smile. No more she mourns her treasures hurled, in subsidies to all the world, no more by foreign threats dismayed, no more deceived with foreign aid, she deals out sums to petty states, whom honor scorns and reason hates, but, wiser by experience grown, finds safety in herself alone. Whilst thus, she cries, "Amy children stand, an honest, valiant, native band, a trained militia, brave and free, true to their king, and true to me, no foreign hirelings shall be known, nor need we hirelings of our own, under a just and pious reign, the statesman's sophistry is vain, vain is each vile, corrupt pretense, these are my natural defense, their faith I know, and they shall prove, the bulwark of the king they love." These, and 1,000 things beside, did we consult a poet's pride, some gay, some serious, might be said, but 10 to 1 they'd not be read, or were they by some curious few, not even those would think them true, for, from the time that Jubal first, sweet ditties to the harp rehearsed, poets have always been suspected, of having truth in rhyme neglected, that bard except, who from his youth, equally famed for faith and truth, by prudence taught, in courtly chime, to courtly ears brought truth in rhyme. But though to poets we allow, no matter when acquired or how, from truth unbounded deviation, which custom calls imagination, yet can't they be supposed to lie, one half so fast as fame can fly, therefore, to solve this Gordian knot, a point we almost had forgot, to courteous readers be it known, that, fond of verse and fossard groan, whilst we in sweet digression sung, fame checked her flight, and held her tongue, and now pursues, with double force, and double speed, her destined course, nor stops till she the place arrives, where genius starves and dullness thrives, where riches virtue are esteemed, and craft is truest wisdom deemed, where commerce proudly rears her throne, in state to other lands unknown, where, to be cheated and to cheat, strangers from every quarter meet, where Christians, Jews, and Turks shake hands, united in commercial bands, all of one faith, and that to own, no God but interest alone. When gods and goddesses come down, to look about them here in town, for change of air is understood, by sons of physic to be good, in due proportions, now and then, for these same gods as well as men, by custom ruled, and not a poet, so very dull but he must know it, in order to remain underscore incog underscore. They always travel in a fog, for if we majesty expose, to vulgar eyes, too cheap it grows, the force is lost, and free from awe, we spy and censure every flaw, but well preserved from public view, it always breaks forth fresh and new, fierce as the sun in all his pride, it shines, and not a spot's descried. Was Jove to lay his thunder by, and with his brethren of the sky, descend to earth, and frisk about, like chattering hen from rout to rout, he would be found, with all his host, a 9 days' wonder at the most. Would we in trim our honours wear, we must preserve them from the air, what is familiar men neglect, however worthy of respect. Did they not find a certain friend, in novelty to recommend, such we, by sad experience, find, the wretched folly of mankind, Venus might unattractive shine, and Hunter fix no eyes but mine. But Fame, who never cared a jot, whether she was admired or not, and never blushed to show her face, at any time in any place, in her own shape, without disguise, and visible to mortal eyes, on 'change exact at 7 o'clock, alighted on the weathercock, which, planted their time out of mind, to note the changes of the wind, might no improper emblem be, of her own mutability. Thrice did she sound her trump, the same, which from the first belonged to Fame, an old ill-favoured instrument, with which the goddess was content, though under a politer race, bagpipes might well supply its place, and thrice, awakened by the sound, a general din prevailed around, confusion through the city passed, and fear bestrode the dreadful blast. Those fragrant currents, which we meet, distilling soft through every street, affrighted from the usual course, ran murmuring upwards to their source, statues wept tears of blood, as fast, as when a Caesar breathed his last, horses, which always used to go, a foot-pace in my Lord Mayor's show, impetuous from their stable broke, and aldermen and oxen spoke. Halls felt the force, towers shook around, and steeples nodded to the ground, St. Paul himself, strange sight, was seen, to bow as humbly as the Dean, the mansion house, for ever placed, a monument of city taste, trembled, and seemed allowed to groan, through all that hideous weight of stone. To still the sound, or stop her ears, remove the cause or sense of fears, physic, in college seated high, would anything but medicine try. No more in Puter's hall was heard the proper force of every word, those seats were desolate become, a hapless elocution dumb. Form, city-born and city-bred, by strict decorum ever led, who 60 years had known the grace of one dull, stiff, unvaried pace, terror prevailing over pride, was seen to take a larger stride, worn to the bone, and clothed in rags, see avarice closer hug his bags, with her own weight unwieldy grown, see credit totter on her throne, virtue alone, had she been there, the mighty sound, unmoved, could bear. Up from the gorgeous bed, where fate dooms annual fools to sleep in state, to sleep so sound that not one gleam of fancy can provoke a dream, great Dulman started at the sound, gaped, rubbed his eyes, and stared around. Much did he wish to know, much fear, when sound so horrid struck his ear, so much unlike those peaceful notes, that equal harmony, which floats on the dull wing of city air, grave prelude to a feast or fair. Much did he inly ruminate concerning the decrees of fate, revolving, though to little end, what this same trumpet might portend. Could the French know that could not be, under Bute's active ministry, too watchful to be so deceived, have stolen hither unperceived? To Newfoundland, indeed, we know, fleets of war unobserved may go, or, if observed, may be supposed, at intervals when reason dozed, no other point in view to bear, but pleasure, health, and change of air, but reason never could sleep so sound, to let an enemy be found, in our land's heart, ere it was known, they had departed from their own. Or could his successor, ambition, is ever haunted with suspicion, his daring successor elect, all customs, rules, and forms reject, and aim, regardless of the crime, to seize the chair before his time? Or, deeming this the lucky hour, seeing his countrymen in power, those countrymen, who, from the first, in tumults and rebellion nursed, however they wear the mask of art, still love a Stuart in their heart, could Scottish Charles conjecture thus, that mental underscore ignis fatuus underscore, led his poor brains a weary dance, from France to England, hence to France, till information in the shape of Chaplain learned, good Sir Crape, a lazy, lounging, pampered priest, well known at every city feast. For he was seen much oftener there, than in the house of God at prayer, who, always ready in his place, never let God's creatures wait for grace, though, as the best historians write, less famed for faith than appetite, his disposition to reveal, the grace was short, and long the meal, who always would excess admit, if haunch or turtle came with it, and never engaged in the defense of self-denying abstinence, when he could fortunately meet with anything he liked to eat, who knew that wine, on scripture plan, was made to cheer the heart of man, knew too, by long experience taught, that cheerfulness was killed by thought, and from those premises collected, which few perhaps would have suspected, that none who, with due share of sense, observed the ways of Providence, could with safe conscience leave off drinking, till they had lost the power of thinking, with eyes half closed came waddling in, and, having stroked his double chin, that chin, whose credit to maintain, against the scoffs of the profane, had cost him more than ever state, paid for a poor electorate, which, after all the cost and rout, it had been better much without. Briefly, for breakfast, you must know, was waiting all the while below, related, bowing to the ground, the cause of that uncommon sound, related, too, that at the door, pomposo, plausible, and more, begged that fame might not be allowed, their shame to publish to the crowd, that some new laws he would provide, if old could not be misapplied, with as much ease and safety there, as they are misapplied elsewhere, by which it might be construed treason, in man to exercise his reason, which might ingeniously devise one punishment for truth and lies, and fairly prove, when they had done, that truth and falsehood were but one, which juries must indeed retain, but their effects should render vain, making all real power to rest in one corrupted rotten breast, by whose false gloss the very Bible might be interpreted a libel. More, who, his reverence to save, pleaded the fool to screen the knave, though all who witnessed on his part, swore for his head against his heart, had taken down, from first to last, a just account of all that passed, but, since the gracious will of fate, who marked the child for wealth and state, even in the cradle, had decreed, the mighty Dulman never should read, that office of disgrace to bear, the smooth-lipped plausible was there, from Holborn even to Clerkenwell, who knows not smooth-lipped plausible? a preacher, deemed of greatest note, for preaching that which others wrote. Had dullmen now, and fools, we see, seldom want curiosity, consented, but the morning shade of Gascoigne hastened to his aid, and in his hand what could be more triumphant Canning's picture bore, that our three heroes should advance, and read their comical romance. How rich a feast, what royal fare, we for our readers might prepare. So rich and yet so safe a feast, that no one foreign blatant beast, within the purlieus of the law, should dare thereon to lay his paw, and, growling, cry, with surly tone, keep off, this feast is all my own. Bending to earth the downcast eye, or planting it against the sky, as one immersed in deepest thought, or with some holy vision caught, his hands, to aid the traitor's art, devoutly folded over his heart, here more, in fraud well skilled, should go, all saint, with solemn step and slow. Oh, that religion's sacred name, meant to inspire the purest flame, a prostitute should ever be, to that archfiend hypocrisy, where we find every other vice, crowned with damned sneaking cowardice. Bold sin reclaimed is often seen, past hope that man, who dares be mean. There, full of flesh, and full of grace, with that fine round unmeaning face, which nature gives to sons of earth, whom she designs for ease and mirth, should the prim plausible be seen, observe his stiff, affected mien, against nature, armed by gravity, his features too in buckle see with what sanctity he reads, with what devotion tells his beads. Now, prophet, show me, by thine art, what's the religion of his heart, show there, if truth thou canst unfold, religion centered all in gold, show him, nor fear correction's rod, as false to friendship, as to God. Horrid, unwieldy, without form. Savage as ocean in a storm, of size prodigious, in the rear, that post of honor, should appear, pomposo, fame around should tell, how he a slave to interest fell, how, for integrity renowned, which booksellers have often found, he for subscribers baits his hook, and takes their cash but wears the book. No matter where wise fear, we know, forbids the robbing of a foe, but what, to serve our private ends, forbids the cheating of our friends? No man alive, who would not swear, all safe, and therefore honest there, for, spite of all the learned say, if we to truth attention pay, the word dishonesty is meant, for nothing else but punishment. Fame, too, should tell, nor heed the threat, of rogues, who brother rogues abet, nor tremble at the terrors hung, aloft, to make her hold her tongue, how to all principles untrue, not fixed to old friends nor to new, he damns the pension which he takes, and loves the steward he forsakes. Nature, who, justly regular, is very seldom known to err, but now and then, in sportive mood, as some rude wits have understood, or through much work required in haste, is with a random stroke disgraced, pomposo, formed on doubtful plan, not quite a beast, nor quite a man, like God knows what, for never yet could the most subtle human wit find out a monster which might be the shadow of a simile. These three, these great, these mighty three, nor can the poet's truth agree, however report have done him wrong, and warped the purpose of his song, amongst the refuse of their race, the sons of infamy, to place that open, generous, manly mind, which we, with joy, in Aldrich find. These three, who now are faintly shown, just sketched, and scarcely to be known, if dullmen their request had heard, in stronger colours had appeared, and friends, though partial, at first view, shuddering, had owned the picture true. But had their journal been displayed, and their whole process open laid, what a vast unexhausted field, for mirth must such a journal yield. In her own anger strongly charmed, against hope, against fear, by conscience armed, then had bold satire made her way, knights, lords, and dukes, her destined prey. But prudence ever sacred name, to those who feel not virtue's flame, or only feel it, at the best, as the dull dupe of interest. Whispered aloud, for this we find, a custom current with mankind, so loud to whisper, that each word may all around be plainly heard, and prudence, sure, would never miss a custom so contrived as this, her candour to secure, yet aim, sure death against another's fame, knights, lords, and dukes. Mad wretch, forbear, dangers unthought of ambush there, confine thy rage to weaker slaves, laugh at small fools, and lash small knaves, but never, helpless, mean, and poor, rush on, where laws cannot secure, nor think thyself, mistaken youth, secure in principles of truth, truth. Why shall every wretch of letters dare to speak truth against his betters? Let ragged virtue stand aloof, nor mutter accents of reproof. Let ragged wit a mute become, when wealth and power would have her dumb. For who the devil doth not know, that titles and estates bestow, an ample stock, wherever they fall, of graces which we mental call? Beggars, in every age and nation, are rogues and fools by situation. The rich and great are understood to be of course both wise and good. Consult, then, interest more than pride, discreetly take the stronger side. Desert, in time, the simple few, who virtue's barren path pursue. Adopt my maxims, follow me, to ball bow the prudent knee. Deny thy God, betray thy friend, at Baal's altars hourly bend, so shalt thou rich and great be seen. To be great now, you must be mean. Hence, tempter, to some weaker soul, which fear and interest control, vainly thy precepts are addressed, where virtue steals the steady breast, through meanness way to boasted power, through guilt repeated every hour. What is thy gain, when all is done? What mighty laurels hast thou won? Dull crowds, to whom the heart's unknown, praise thee for virtues not thine own, but will, at once man's scourge and friend, impartial conscience to commend? From her reproaches canst thou fly? Canst thou with worlds her silence buy? Believe it not, her stings shall find a passage to thy coward mind. There shall she fix her sharpest dart, there show thee truly as thou art, unknown to those by whom thou art prized, known to thyself to be despised. The man who weds the sacred muse disdains all mercenary views, and he, who virtue's throne would rear, laughs at the phantoms raised by fear. Though folly, robed in purple, shines, though vice exhausts Peruvian minds, yet shall they tremble and turn pale, when satire wields her mighty flail. Or should they, of rebuke afraid, with Malcolm seek hell's deepest shade, satire, still mindful of her aim, shall bring the cowards back to shame. Hated by many, loved by few, above each little private view, honest, though poor, and who shall dare to disappoint my boasting there? Hardy and resolute, though weak, the dictates of my heart to speak, willing I bend at satire's throne, what power I have be all her own. Nor shall yon lawyer's specious art, conscious of a corrupted heart, create imaginary fear, to damp us in our bold career. Why should we fear? And what? The laws? They all are armed in virtue's cause, and aiming at the self-same end. Satire is always virtue's friend. Nor shall that muse, whose honest rage, in a corrupt degenerate age, when, dead to every nicer sense, deep sunk in vice and indolence, the spirit of old Rome was broke, beneath the tyrant fiddler's yoke, banished the rose from Nero's cheek, under a Brunswick fear to speak. Drawn by conceit from reason's plan, how vain is that poor creature, man! How pleased is every paltry elf, to prate about that thing, himself. After my promise made in rhyme, and meant in earnest at that time, to jog, according to the mode, in one dull pace, in one dull road, what but that curse of heart and head, to this digression could have led? Where plunged, in vain I look about, and can't stay in, nor well get out. Could I, whilst humour held the quill, could I digress with half that skill, could I with half that skill return, which we so much admire in Sterne, where each digression, seeming vain, and only fit to entertain, is found, on better recollection, to have a just and nice connection, to help the whole with wondrous art, whence it seems idly to depart, then should our readers never accuse these wild excursions of the muse, never backward turn dull pages over, to recollect what went before, deeply impressed, and ever new, each image past should start to view, and we to Dulman now come in, as if we never had absent been. Have you not seen, when danger's near, the coward cheek turn white with fear? Have you not seen, when danger's fled, the self-same cheek with joy turn red? These are low symptoms which we find, fit only for a vulgar mind, where honest features, void of art, betray the feelings of the heart. Our Dulman with a face was blessed, where no one passion was expressed. His eye, in a fine stupor caught, implied a plenteous lack of thought, nor was one line that whole face seen in, which could be justly charged with meaning. To avarice by birth allied, debauch by marriage into pride, in age grown fond of youthful sports, of pomps, of vanities, and courts, and by success too mighty made, to love his country or his trade. Stiff in opinion, no rare case, with blockheads in or out of place, too weak, and insolent of soul, to suffer reason's just control, but bending, of his own accord, to that trim transient toy, my lord, the dupe of Scots, a fatal race, whom God in wrath contrived to place, to scourge our crimes, and gall our pride, a constant thorn in England's side, whom first, our greatness to oppose, he in his vengeance marked for foes, then, more to serve his wrathful ends, and more to curse us, marked for friends, deep in the state, if we give credit to him, for no one else ever said it, sworn friend of great ones not a few, though he their titles only knew, and those, which, envious of his breeding, bookworms have charged to want of reading, merely to show himself polite, he never would pronounce aright, an orator with whom a host, of those which Rome and Athens boast, in all their pride might not contend, who, with no powers to recommend, whilst Jacky Hume, and Billy Whitehead, and Dicky Glover, sat delighted, could speak whole days in nature's spite, just as those able verse men write, great Dulman from his bed arose, thrice did he spit, thrice wiped his nose, thrice strove to smile, thrice strove to frown, and thrice looked up and thrice looked down, then silence broke. Crape, who am I? Crape bowed, and smiled an arch reply. Am I not, Crape? I am, you know, above all those who are below. Have I not knowledge? And for wit, money will always purchase it, nor, if it needful should be found, will I grudge 10 or 20 pound, for which the whole stock may be bought, of scoundrel wits, not worth a groat. But lest I should proceed too far, I'll feel my friend the minister, great men, Crape, must not be neglected, how he in this point is affected, for, as I stand a magistrate, to serve him first, and next the state, perhaps he may not think it fit, to let his magistrates have wit. Boast I not, at this very hour, those large effects which troop with power? Am I not mighty in the land? Do not I sit whilst others stand? Am I not with rich garments graced, in seat of honour always placed? And do not sits of chief degree, though proud to others, bend to me? Have I not, as a justice ought, the law such wholesome rigour taught, that fornication, in disgrace, is now afraid to show her face, and not one whore these walls approaches, unless they ride in their own coaches? And shall this fame, an old poor strumpet, without our license sound her trumpet, and, envious of our city's quiet, in broad daylight blow up a riot? If insolence like this we bear, where is our state? Our office where? Farewell, all honours of our reign, farewell, the neck-ennobling chain, freedom's known badge over all the globe, farewell, the solemn spreading robe, farewell, the sword, farewell, the mace, farewell, all title, pomp, and place, removed from men of high degree, a loss to them, Crape, not to me, banished to Chippenham or to Frome, Dulman once more shall ply the loom. Crape, lifting up his hands and eyes, Edelman. The loom. At Chippenham, cries, if there be powers which greatness love, which rule below, but dwell above, those powers united all shall join, to contradict the rash design. Sooner shall stubborn will lay down his opposition with his gown, sooner shall Temple leave the road, which leads to virtue's mean abode, sooner shall Scots this country quit, and England's foes be friends to Pitt, than Dulman, from his grandeur throne, shall wander outcast and unknown. Sure as that cane, a cane there stood, near to a table made of wood, of dry fine wood, a table made, by some rare artist in the trade, who had enjoyed immortal praise, if he had lived in Homer's days, sure as that cane, which once was seen, in pride of life all fresh and green, the banks of Indus to adorn, then, of its leafy honours shorn, according to exact's rule, was fashioned by the workman's tool, and which at present we behold, curiously polished, crowned with gold well wrought, sure as that cane, shall never on its native plain, strike root afresh, shall never more, flourish in tawny India's shore, so sure shall Dulman and his race, to latest times this station grace. Dulman, who all this while had kept his eyelids closed as if he slept, now looking steadfastly on Crape, as at some god in human shape. Crape, I protest, you seem to me to have discharged a prophecy, yes from the first it doth appear, planted by fate, the Dulmans here, have always held a quiet reign, and here shall to the last remain. Crape, they are all wrong about this ghost, quite on the wrong side of the post, blockheads. To take it in their head, to be a message from the dead, for that by mission they design, a word not half so good as mine. Crape, here it is, start not one doubt, a plot I've found it out. O God, cries Crape, how blessed the nation, where one son boasts such penetration. Crape, I've not time to tell you now, when I discovered this, or how, to stand to go if he's not there, his place let bully Norton bear, our citizens to council call, let all meet, tease the cause of all, let the 3 witnesses attend, with allegations to befriend, to swear just so much, and no more, as we instruct them in before. Stay, Crape, come back what? Don't you see the effects of this discovery? Dullman all care and toil endures, the profit, Crape, will all be yours. A mitre, for this arduous task, performed, they'll grant whatever I ask, a mitre, and perhaps the best, shall, through my interest, make thee blessed, and at this time, when gracious fate dooms to the Scot the reins of state, who is more fit, and for your use, we could some instances produce, of England's church to be the head, than you, a Presbyterian bred? But when thus mighty you are made, unlike the brethren of thy trade, be grateful, Crape, and let me not, like old Newcastle, be forgot. But an affair, Crape, of this size, will ask from conduct vast supplies. It must not, as the vulgar say, be done in hugger-mugger way, traitors, indeed, and that's discreet, who hatch the plot, in private meet, they should in public go, no doubt, whose business is to find it out. Tomorrow if the day appear, likely to turn out fair and clear, proclaim a grand procession, be all the city pomp displayed, let the train bands. Crape shook his head, they heard the trumpet, and were fled. Well, cries the knight, if that's the case, my servants shall supply their place, my servants mine alone no more, than what my servants did before, dost not remember, Crape, that day, when, Dullman's grandeur to display, as all too simple and too low, our city friends were thrust below, whilst, as more worthy of our love, courtiers were entertained above. Tell me, who waited then? And how? My servants mine, and why not now? In haste then, Crape, to Stentor go, but send up Hart, who waits below, with him, till you return again, reach me my spectacles and cane, I'll make a proof how I advance in my new accomplishment of dancing. Not quite so fast as lightning flies, winged with red anger, through the skies, not quite so fast as, sent by Jove, Iris descends on wings of love, not quite so fast as terror rides, when he the chasing winds bestrides. Crape hobbled, but his mind was good, could he go faster than he could? Near to that tower, which, as we're told, the mighty Julius raised of old, where, to the block by justice led, the rebel Scot hath often bled, where arms are kept so clean, so bright, it were sin they should be soiled in fight, where brutes of foreign race are shown, by brutes much greater of our own, fast by the crowded Thames, is found, an ample square of sacred ground, where artless eloquence presides, and nature every sentence guides. Here female parliaments debate, about religion, trade, and state, here every naiad's patriot soul, disdaining foreign base control, despising French, despising Erse, pours forth the plain old English curse, and bears aloft, with terrors hung, the honours of the vulgar tongue. Here Stentor, always heard with awe, in thundering accents deals out law, 12 furlongs off each dreadful word, was plainly and distinctly heard, and every neighbour hill around, returned and swelled the mighty sound, the loudest virgin of the stream, compared with him would silent seem, Thames, who, enraged to find his course opposed, rolls down with double force, against the bridge indignant roars, and lashes the resounding shores, compared with him, at lowest tide, in softest whispers seems to glide. Hither, directed by the noise, swelled with the hope of future joys, through too much zeal and haste made lame, the reverend slave of Dullman came. Stentor with such a serious air, with such a face of solemn care, as might import him to contain a nation's welfare in his brain, Stentor, cries Crape, I am hither sent, on business of most high intent. Great Dullman's orders to convey, Dullman commands, and I obey, big with those throes which patriots feel, and labouring for the commonweal, some secret, which forbids him rest, tumbles and tosses in his breast, tumbles and tosses to get free, and thus the chief commands by me, tomorrow, if the day appear, likely to turn out fair and clear, proclaim a grand procession, be all the city pomp displayed, our citizens to council call, let all meet, tease the cause of all. The Ghost. Book 4. By Charles Churchill. Coxcombs, who vainly make pretence to something of exalted sense, both other men, and, gravely wise, affect those pleasures to despise, which, merely to the eye confined, bring no improvement to the mind, rail at all pomp, they would not go, for millions to a puppet show, nor can forgive the mighty crime, of countenancing pantomime, no, not at Covent Garden, where, without a head for play or player, or, could a head be found most fit, without one player to second it. They must, obeying folly's call, thrive by mere show, or not at all, with these grave fops, who, bless their brains, most cruel to themselves, take pains for wretchedness, and would be thought much wiser than a wise man ought, for his own happiness, to be, who what they hear, and what they see, and what they smell, and taste, and feel, distrust, till reason sets her seal, and, by long trains of consequences, in short, give sanction to the senses, who would not, heaven forbid it, waste 1 hour in what the world calls taste, nor fondly deign to laugh or cry, unless they know some reason why. With these grave fops, whose system seems to give up certainty for dreams, the eye of man is understood, as for no other purpose good, than as a door, through which, of course, their passage crowding, objects force, a downright usher, to admit newcomers to the court of wit. Good gravity, forbear thy spleen, when I say wit, I wisdom mean, where, such the practice of the court, which legal precedents support, not one idea is allowed to pass unquestioned in the crowd, but ere it can obtain the grace of holding in the brain a place, before the chief in congregation, must stand a strict examination. Not such as those, who physic twirl, full fraught with death, from every curl, who prove, with all becoming state, their voice to be the voice of fate, prepared with essence, drop, and pill, to be another ward or hill, before they can obtain their ends, to sign death warrants for their friends, and talents vast as theirs employ, underscore secundum artem underscore to destroy, must pass, all laws their rage restrain, before the chiefs of Warwick Lane, thrice happy lane, where, uncontrolled, in power and lethargy grown old, most fit to take, in this blessed land, the reins which fell from Wyndham's hand, her lawful throne great dullness rears, still more herself, as more in years, where she, and who shall dare deny, her right, when Reeves and Chaunce's by. Calling to mind, in ancient time, one Garth, who erred in wit and rhyme, ordains, from henceforth, to admit none of the rebel sons of wit, and makes it her peculiar care, that Scomberg never shall be there. Not such as those, whom Polly trains, to letters, though unblessed with brains, who, destitute of power and will, to learn, are kept to learning still, whose heads, when other methods fail, receive instruction from the tail, because their sires, a common case, which brings the children to disgrace, imagine it a certain rule, they never could beget a fool. Must pass, or must compound for, ere the chaplain, full of beef and prayer, will give his reverend permit, announcing them for orders fit, so that the prelate, what's a name? All prelates now are much the same, may, with a conscience safe and quiet, with holy hands lay on that fiat, which doth all faculties dispense, all sanctity, all faith, all sense, makes mud unquite a saint appear, and makes an oracle of Cherie. Not such as in that solemn seat, where the 9 ladies hold retreat, the ladies 9, who, as we're told, scorning those haunts they loved of old, the banks of Isis now prefer, nor will 1 hour from Oxford stir, are held for form, which Balaam's ass, as well as Balaam's self might pass, and with his master take degrees, could he contrive to pay the fees. Men of sound parts, who, deeply read, overload the storehouse of the head, with furniture they never can use, cannot forgive our rambling muse, this wild excursion, cannot see, why physic and divinity, to the surprise of all beholders, are lugged in by the head and shoulders, or how, in any point of view, Oxford hath anything to do. But men of nice and subtle learning, remarkable for quick discerning, through spectacles of critic mould, without instruction, will behold, that we a method here have got, to show what is, by what is not, and that our drift, parenthesis, for once apart, is briefly this, within the brain's most secret cells, a certain Lord Chief Justice dwells, of sovereign power, whom, one and all, with common voice, we reason call, though, for the purposes of satire, a name, in truth, is no great matter, Jeffreys or Mansfield, which you will, it means a Lord Chief Justice still. Here, so our great projectors say, the senses all must homage pay, hither they all must tribute bring, and prostrate fall before their king, whatever unto them is brought, is carried on the wings of thought, before his throne, where, in full state, he on their merits holds debate, examines, cross-examines, weighs, their right to censure or to praise, nor doth his equal voice depend on narrow views of foe and friend, nor can, or flattery, or force, divert him from his steady course, the channel of inquiries clear, no sham examinations here. He, upright justices, no doubt, underscore ad libitum underscore puts in and out, adjusts and settles in a trice, what virtue is, and what is vice, what is perfection, what defect, what we must choose, and what reject, he takes upon him to explain, what pleasure is, and what is pain, whilst we, obedient to the whim, and resting all our faith on him, true members of the Stoic wheel, must learn to think, and cease to feel. This glorious system, formed for man, to practice when and how he can, if the five senses, in alliance, to reason hurl a proud defiance, and, though oft conquered, yet unbroke, endeavor to throw off that yoke, which they a greater slavery hold, than Jewish bondage was of old, or if they, something touched with shame, allow him to retain the name of royalty, and, as in sport, to hold a mimic formal court, permitted no uncommon thing, to be a kind of puppet king, and suffered, by the way of toy, to hold a globe, but not employ, our system-mongers, struck with fear, prognosticate destruction near, all things to anarchy must run, the little world of man's undone. Nay, should the eye, that nicest sense, neglect to send intelligence, unto the brain, distinct and clear, of all that passes in her sphere, should she, presumptuous, joy receive, without the understanding's leave, they deem it rank and daring treason, against the monarchy of reason, not thinking, though they are wondrous wise, that few have reason, most have eyes, so that the pleasures of the mind, to a small circle are confined, whilst those which to the senses fall, become the property of all. Besides, and this is sure a case, not much at present out of place, where nature reason doth deny, no art can that defect supply, but if, for it is our intent, fairly to state the argument, a man should want an eye or two, the remedy is sure, though new, the cure's at hand, no need of fear, for proof behold the Chevalier, as well prepared, beyond all doubt, to put eyes in, as put them out. But, argument apart, which tends to embitter foes and separate friends, nor, turned apostate from the nine, would I, though bred up a divine, and foe, of course, to reason's wheel, widen that breach I cannot heal, by his own sense and feelings taught, in speech as liberal as in thought, let every man enjoy his whim, what's he to me, or I to him? Might I, though never robed in ermine, a matter of this weight determine, no penalties should settled be, to force men to hypocrisy, to make them ape an awkward zeal, and, feeling not, pretend to feel. I would not have, might sentence rest, finally fixed within my breast, even Annette censured and confined, because we're of a different mind. Nature, who, in her act most free, herself delights in liberty, profuse in love, and without bound, pours joy on every creature round, whom yet, was every bounty shed, in double portions on our head, we could not truly bounteous call, if freedom did not crown them all. By providence forbid to stray, brutes never can mistake their way, determined still, they plod along, by instinct, neither right nor wrong, but man, had he the heart to use, his freedom, hath a right to choose, whether he acts, or well, or ill, depends entirely on his will. To her last work, her favourite man, is given, on nature's better plan, a privilege in power to err. Nor let this phrase resentment stir, amongst the grave ones, since indeed, the little merit man can plead, in doing well, depended still, upon his power of doing ill. Opinions should be free as air, no man, whate'er his rank, whate'er his qualities, a claim can found, that my opinion must be bound, and square with his, such slavish chains, from foes the liberal soul disdains. Nor can, though true to friendship, bend, to wear them even from a friend. Let those, who rigid judgment own, submissive bow at judgment's throne, and if they of no value hold, pleasure, till pleasure is grown cold, palled and insipid, forced to wait, for judgment's regular debate, to give it warrant, let them find, dull subjects suited to their mind. Theirs be slow wisdom, be my plan, to live as merry as I can, regardless, as the fashions go, whether there's reason for't or no, be my employment here on earth, to give a liberal scope to mirth, life's barren vale with flowers to adorn, and pluck a rose from every thorn. But if, by error led astray, I chance to wander from my way, let no blind guide observe, in spite, I'm wrong, who cannot set me right. That doctor could I never endure, who found disease, and not a cure, nor can I hold that man a friend, whose zeal a helping hand shall lend, to open happy folly's eyes, and, making wretched, make me wise, for next, a truth which can't admit, reproof from wisdom or from wit, to being happy here below, is to believe that we are so. Some few in knowledge find relief, I place my comfort in belief. Some for reality may call, fancy to me is all in all. Imagination, through the trick of doctors, often makes us sick, And why, let any sophist tell, may it not likewise make us well? This I am sure, whate'er our view, whatever shadows we pursue, for our pursuits, be what they will, are little more than shadows still. Too swift they fly, too swift and strong, for man to catch or hold them long. But joys which in the fancy live, each moment to each man may give, true to himself, and true to ease. He softens fate's severe decrees, and can a mortal wish for more? Creates, and makes himself new over, mocks boasted vain reality, and is, whate'er he wants to be. Hail, fancy! To thy power I owe deliverance from the gripe of woe, to thee I owe a mighty debt, which gratitude shall never forget, whilst memory can her force employ, a large increase of every joy. When at my doors, too strongly barred, authority had placed a guard, 11, a knavish guard, ordained by law, to keep poor honesty in awe, authority, severe and stern, to intercept my wished return, when foes grew proud, and friends grew cool, and laughter seized each sober fool, when candor started in amaze, and, meaning censure, hinted praise, when prudence, lifting up her eyes and hands, thanked heaven that she was wise, when all around me, with an air of hopeless sorrow, looked despair, when they, or said, or seemed to say, there is but one only way, better, and be advised by us, not be at all, than to be thus, when virtue shunned the shock, and pride, disabled, lay by virtue's side, too weak my ruffled soul to cheer, which could not hope, yet would not fear, health in her motion, the wild grace of pleasure speaking in her face, dull regularity thrown by, and comfort beaming from her eye, fancy, in richest robes arrayed, came smiling forth, and brought me aid. Came smiling over that dreadful time, and, more to bless me, came in rhyme. Nor is her power to me confined, it spreads, it comprehends mankind. When, to the spirit-stirring sound of trumpets breathing courage round, and fifes well mingled, to restrain, and bring that courage down again, or to the melancholy knell of the dull, deep, and doleful bell, such as of late the good Saint Bride, 12, muffled, to mortify the pride of those who, England quite forgot, paid their vile homage to the Scot, whereas Gill held the foremost place, whilst my lord figured at a race. Processions, 'tis not worth debate, whether they are of stage or state, move on, so very, very slow, 'tis doubtful if they move, or no, when the performers all the while, mechanically frown or smile, or, with a dull and stupid stare, a vacancy of sense declare, or, with down-bending eye, seem wrought into a labyrinth of thought, where reason wanders still in doubt, and, once got in, cannot get out. What cause sufficient can we find to satisfy a thinking mind? Why, duped by such vain farces, man descends to act on such a plan? Why they, who hold themselves divine, can in such wretched follies join, strutting like peacocks, or like crows, themselves and nature to expose? What cause, but that, you'll understand, we have our remedy at hand, that if perchance we start a doubt, ere it is fixed, we wipe it out, as surgeons, when they lop a limb, whether for profit, fame, or whim, or mere experiment to try, must always have a styptic by. Fancy steps in, and stamps that real, which, ipso facto, is ideal. Can none remember? Yes, I know, all must remember that rare show, when to the country sense went down, and fools came flocking up to town, when knights, a work which all admit to be for knighthood much unfit, built booths for hire, when parsons played, in robes canonical arrayed, and, fiddling, joined the Smithfield dance, the price of tickets to advance, or, unto tapsters turned, dealt out, running from booth to booth about, to every scoundrel, by retail, true penn'orths of beef and ale, then first prepared, by bringing beer in, for present grand electioneering, when heralds, running all about, to bring in order, turned it out, when, by the prudent marshal's care, lest the rude populace should stare, and with unhallowed eyes profane, gay puppets of patrician strain, the whole procession, as in spite, unheard, unseen, stole off by night, when our loved monarch, nothing both, solemnly took that sacred oath, whence mutual firm agreements spring, betwixt the subject and the king, by which, in usual manner crowned, his head, his heart, his hands, he bound, against himself, should passion stir, the least propensity to err, against all slaves, who might prepare, or open force, or hidden snare, that glorious charter to maintain, by which we serve, and he must reign. Then fancy, with unbounded sway, revelled sole mistress of the day, and wrought such wonders, as might make Egyptian sorcerers forsake their baffled mockeries, and own the palm of magic hers alone. a knight, who, in the silken lap of lazy peace, had lived on pap, who never yet had dared to roam, bove 10 or 20 miles from home, nor even that, unless a guide was placed to amble by his side, and troops of slaves were spread around, to keep his honor safe and sound, who could not suffer, for his life, a point to sword, or edge to knife, and always fainted at the sight of blood, though 'twas not shed in fight, who disinherited one son, for firing off an alder gun, and whipped another, 6 years old, because the boy, presumptuous, bold, to madness, likely to become, a very Swiss, had beat a drum, though it appeared an instrument, most peaceable and innocent, having, from first, been in the hands and service of the city bands, graced with those ensigns, which were meant to further honor's dread intent, the minds of warriors to inflame, and spur them on to deeds of fame, with little sword, large spurs, high feather, fearless of everything but weather, and all must own, who pay regard to charity, it had been hard, that in his very first campaign, his honors should be soiled with rain, a hero all at once became, and, seeing others much the same, in point of valor as himself, who leave their courage on a shelf, from year to year, till some such rout, in proper season calls it out, strutted, looked big, and swaggered more, than ever hero did before, looked up, looked down, looked all around, like Mavers, grimly smiled and frowned, seemed heaven, and earth, and hell to call, to fight, that he might rout them all, and personated valor's style, so long, spectators to beguile, that, passing strange, and wondrous true, himself at last believed it too, nor for a time could he discern, till truth and darkness took their turn, so well did fancy play her part, that coward still was at the heart. Whiffle, who knows not Whiffle's name, by the impartial voice of fame, recorded first through all this land, in vanity's illustrious band. Who, by all bounteous nature meant, for offices of hardiment, a modern Hercules at least, to rid the world of each wild beast which came in view, whether on 4 legs or on 2, degenerate, delights to prove his force on the parade of love, disclaims the joys which camps afford, and for the distaff quits the sword, who fond of women would appear, to public eye and public ear, but, when in private, lets them know, how little they can trust to show, who sports a woman, as of course, just as a jockey shows a horse, and then returns her to the stable, or vainly plants her at his table, where he would rather Venus find, so palled, and so depraved his mind, than, by some great occasion led, to seize her panting in her bed, burning with more than mortal fires, and melting in her own desires, who, ripe in years, is yet a child, through fashion, not through feeling, wild. Whate'er in others, who proceed, as sense and nature have decreed, from real passion flows, in him, is mere effect of mode and whim, who laughs, a very common way, because he nothing has to say, as your choice spirits odes dispense, to fill up vacancies of sense, who, having some small sense, defies it, or, using, always misapplies it, who now and then brings something forth, which seems indeed of sterling worth, something, by sudden start and fit, which at a distance looks like wit, but, on examination near, to his confusion will appear, by truth's fair glass, to be at best, a threadbare jester's threadbare jest, who frisks and dances through the street, sings without voice, rides without seat, plays over his tricks, like Aesop's ass, a gratis fool to all who pass, who riots, though he loves not waste, whores without lust, drinks without taste, acts without sense, talks without thought, does everything but what he ought, who, led by forms, without the power of vice, is vicious, who 1 hour, proud without pride, the next will be, humble without humility, whose vanity we all discern, the spring on which his actions turn, whose aim in erring, is to err, so that he may be singular, and all his utmost wishes mean, is, though his laughed at, to be seen, such, for when flattery's soothing strain, had robbed the muse of her disdain, and found a method to persuade, her art to soften every shade, justice, enraged, the pencil snatched, from her degenerate hand, and scratched out every trace, then, quick as thought, from life this striking likeness caught, in mind, in manners, and in mien, such Whiffle came, and such was seen, in the world's eye, but, strange to tell, misled by fancy's magic spell, deceived, not dreaming of deceit, cheated, but happy in the cheat, was more than human in his own. Oh, Beau all at fancy's throne, whose power could make so vile an elf, with patience bear that thing, himself. But, mistress of each art to please, creative fancy, what are these pageants of a trifler's pen, to what thy power effected then? Familiar with the human mind, and swift and subtle as the wind, which we all feel, yet no one knows, or whence it comes, or where it goes. Fancy at once in every part, possessed the eye, the head, the heart, and in 1,000 forms arrayed, 1,000 various gambols played. Here, in a face which well might ask, the privilege to wear a mask, in spite of law and justice teach, for public good to excuse the breach, within the furrow of a wrinkle, twixt eyes, which could not shine but twinkle, like sentinels eye the starry way, who wait for the return of day, almost burnt out, and seem to keep their watch, like soldiers, in their sleep, or like those lamps, which, by the power of law, must burn from hour to hour, else they, without redemption, fall under the terrors of that hall, which, once notorious for a hop, is now become a justice shop, which are so managed to go out, just when the time comes round about. Which yet, through emulation, strive to keep their dying light alive, and, not uncommon, as we find, amongst the children of mankind, as they grow weaker, would seem stronger, and burn a little longer. Fancy, betwixt such eyes enshrined, no brush to daub, no mill to grind, thrice waved her wand around, whose force changed in an instant nature's course, and, hardly credible in rhyme, not only stopped, but called back time, the face of every wrinkle cleared, smooth as the floating stream appeared, down the neck ringlets spread their flame, the neck admiring whence they came, on the arched brow the graces played, on the full bosom Cupid laid, suns, from their proper orbits sent, became for eyes a supplement, teeth, white as ever teeth were seen, delivered from the hand of green, started, in regular array, like train bands on a grand field day, into the gums, which would have fled, but, wondering, turned from white to red, quite altered was the whole machine, and lady was 15. Here she made lordly temples rise, before the pious Dashwood's eyes, temples which, built aloft in air, may serve for show, if not for prayer, in solemn form herself, before, arrayed like faith, the Bible bore. There over Malcolm's feathered head, who, quite a man of gingerbread, savoured in talk, in dress, and phiz, more of another world than this, to a dwarf muse a giant page, the last grave fop of the last age, in a superb and feathered hearse, bescutcheoned and betagged with verse, which, to beholders from afar, appeared like a triumphal car, she rode, in a cast rainbow clad, there, throwing off the hallowed plaid, naked, as when, in those drear cells, where, self-blessed, self-cursed, madness dwells, pleasure, on whom, in laughter's shape, frenzy had perfected a rape, first brought her forth, before her time, wild witness of her shame and crime, driving before an idle band, of drivelling stewards, hand in hand, some who, to curse mankind, had wore a crown they never must think of more, others, whose baby brows were graced with paper crowns, and toys of paste, she jigged, and, playing on the flute, spread raptures over the soul of Bute. Big with vast hopes, some mighty plan, which wrought the busy soul of man, to her full bent, the civil law, fit code to keep a world in awe, bound over his brows, fair to behold, as Jewish frontlets were of old, the famous charter of our land, defaced, and mangled in his hand, as one whom deepest thoughts employ, but deepest thoughts of truest joy, serious and slow he strode, he stalked, before him troops of heroes walked, whom best he loved, of heroes crowned, by Tories guarded all around, dull solemn pleasure in his face, he saw the honours of his race, he saw their lineal glories rise, and touched, or seemed to touch, the skies, not the most distant mark of fear, no sign of axe or scaffold near, not one cursed thought to cross his will, of such a place as Tower Hill. Curse on this muse, a flippant jade, a shrew, like every other maid, who turns the corner of 19, devoured with peevishness and spleen, her tongue, for as, when bound for life, the husband suffers for the wife, so if in any works of rhyme, perchance there blunders out a crime, poor culprit bards must always rue it, although 'tis plain the muses do it, sooner or later cannot fail, to send me headlong to a jail. Whate'er my theme, our themes we choose, in modern days, without a muse, just as a father will provide, to join a bridegroom and a bride, as if, though they must be the players, the game was wholly his, not theirs. Whate'er my theme, the muse, who still owns no direction but her will, plies off, and ere I could expect, by ways oblique and indirect, at once quite overhead and ears, in fatal politics appears. Time was, and, if I aught discern, of fate, that time shall soon return, when, decent and demure at least, as grave and dull as any priest, I could see vice in robes arrayed, could see the game of folly played, successfully in fortune's school, without exclaiming rogue or fool. Time was, when, nothing both or proud, I lacked with the fawning crowd, scoundrels in office, and would bow to ciphers great in place, but now, upright I stand, as if wise fate, to complement a shattered state, had me, like Atlas, hither sent, to shoulder up the firmament, and if I stooped, with general crack, the heavens would tumble from my back. Time was, when rank and situation secured the great ones of the nation from all control, satire and law, kept only little knaves in awe, but now, decorum lost, I stand, bemused, a pencil in my hand, and, dead to every sense of shame, careless of safety and of fame, the names of scoundrels minute down, and libel more than half the town. How can a statesman be secure in all his villainies, if poor and dirty authors thus shall dare to lay his rotten bosom bare? Muses should pass away their time in dressing out the poet's rhyme, with bills and ribbons, an array, each line in harmless taste, though gay. When the hot burning fit is on, they should regale their restless son with something to allay his rage, some cool Castalian beverage, or some such draught, though they, 'tis plain, taking the Muse's name in vain, know nothing of their real court, and only fable from report, as makes a Whitehead's ode go down, or slakes the Feverett of Brown. But who would in his senses think of Muses giving gall to drink, or that their folly should afford to raving poets gun or sword? Poets were never designed by fate to meddle with affairs of state, nor should, if we may speak our thought, truly as men of honor ought, sound policy their rage admit, to launch the thunderbolts of wit about those heads, which, when they are shot, can't tell if 'twas by wit or not. These things well known, what devil, in spite, can have seduced me thus to write, out of that road, which must have led to riches, without heart or head, into that road, which, had I more than ever poet had before, of wit and virtue, in disgrace, would keep me still, and out of place, which, if some judge, you'll understand, one famous through the land, for making law, should stand my friend, at last may in a pillory end, and all this, I myself admit, without one cause to lead to it. For instance, now this book The Ghost, methinks I hear some critic post, remark most gravely the first word, which we about the ghost have heard. Peace, my good sir. Not quite so fast. What is the first, may be the last, which is a point, all must agree, cannot depend on you or me. Fanny, no ghost of common mould, is not by forms to be controlled, to keep her state, and show her skill, she never comes but when she will. I wrote and wrote, perhaps you doubt, and shrewdly, what I wrote about, believe me, much to my disgrace, I, too, am in the self-same case winking smiley. But still I wrote, till Fanny came, impatient, nor could any shame on me with equal justice fall, if she had never come at all. An underling, I could not stir, without the cue thrown out by her, nor from the subject aid receive, until she came and gave me leave. So that, ye sons of erudition, mark, this is but a supposition, nor would I to so wise a nation suggest it as a revelation, if henceforth, dully turning over page after page, ye read no more of Fanny, who, in sea or air, may be departed God knows where, rail at jilt fortune, but agree, no censure can be laid on me, for sure, the cause let Mansfield try, Fanny is in the fault, not I. But, to return, and this I hold, a secret worth its weight in gold, to those who write, as I write now, not to mind where they go, or how, through ditch, through bog, over hedge and stile, make it but worth the reader's while, and keep a passage fair and plain, always to bring him back again. Through dirt, who scruples to approach, at pleasure's call, to take a coach? But we should think the man a clown, who in the dirt should set us down. But to return, if wit, who never the shackles of restraint could bear, in wayward humour should refuse her timely succour to the muse, and, to no rules and orders tied, roughly deny to be her guide, she must renounce decorum's plan, and get back when, and how she can, as parsons, who, without pretext, as soon as mentioned, quit their text, and, to promote sleep's genial power, grope in the dark for half an hour, give no more reason, for we know, reason is vulgar, mean, and low, why they come back, should it befall, that ever they come back at all, into the road, to end their route, than they can give why they went out. But to return this book The Ghost, a mere amusement at the most, a trifle, fit to wear away the horrors of a rainy day, a slight shot silk, for summer wear, just as our modern statesmen are, if rigid honesty permit, that I for once purloin the wit of him, who, were we all to steal, is much too rich the theft to feel, Yet in this book, where bass should join, with mirth to sugar every line, where it should all be mere chit-chat, lively, good-humoured, and all that, where honest satire, in disgrace, should not so much as show her face, the shrew, overleaping all due bounds, breaks into laughter's sacred grounds, and, in contempt, plays over her tricks, in science, trade, and politics. Why should the distempered scold attempt to blacken men enrolled in power's dread book, whose mighty skill can twist an empire to their will, whose voice is fate, and on their tongue law, liberty, and life are hung, whom, on inquiry, truth shall find, with Stuarts linked, time out of mind, superior to their country's laws, defenders of a tyrant's cause, men who the same damned maxims hold, darkly, which they avowed of old, who, though by different means, pursue the end which they had first in view, and, force found vain, now play their part, with much less honour, much more art? Why, at the corners of the streets, to every patriot drudge she meets, known or unknown, with furious cry, should she wild clamours vent? Or why, the minds of groundlings to inflame, a Dashwood, Bute, and Wyndham name? Why, having not, to our surprise, the fear of death before her eyes, bearing, and that but now and then, no other weapon but her pen, should she an argument afford, for blood to men who wear a sword? Men, who can nicely trim and pare a point of honour to a hair, honour. A word of nice import, a pretty trinket in a court, which my lord, quite in rapture, feels, dangling and rattling with his seals, honour. A word which all the nine would be much puzzled to define, honour. A word which torture mocks, and might confound 1,000 locks, which for I leave to wiser heads, who fields of death prefer to beds of down, to find out, if they can, what honour is, on their wild plan, is not, to take it in their way, and this we sure may dare to say, without incurring an offence, courage, law, honesty, or sense, men, who, all spirit, life, and soul, neat butchers of a buttonhole, having more skill, believe it true, that they must have more courage too, men who, without a place or name, their fortunes speechless as their fame, would by the sword new fortunes carve, and rather die in fight than starve, at coronations, a vast field, which food of every kind might yield, of good sound food, at once most fit, for purposes of health and wit, could not ambitious satire rest, content with what she might digest? Could she not feast on things of course, a champion, or a champion's horse? A champion's horse, no, better say, though better figured on that day, a horse, which might appear to us, who deal in rhyme, a Pegasus, a rider, who, when once got on, might pass for a Bellerophon, drops on a sudden from the skies, to catch and fix our wondering eyes, to which, with wand instead of whip, the world with noble horsemanship, to twist and twine, both horse and man, on such a well-concerted plan, that, centaur-like, when all was done, we scarce could think they were not one? Could she not to our itching ears, bring the new names of new coin peers, who walked, nobility forgot, with shoulders fitter for a knot, than robes of honour, for whose sake, heralds in form were forced to make, because they could not find, great predecessors to their mind? Could she not, though 'tis doubtful since, whether he plumber is, or prince, tell of a simple knight's advance, to be a doughty peer of France? Tell how he did a dukedom gain, and Robinson was Aquitaine? Tell how her city chiefs, disgraced, were at an empty table placed, a gross neglect, which, whilst they live, they can't forget, and won't forgive, a gross neglect of all those rights, which march with city appetites, of all those canons, which we find, by gluttony, time out of mind, established, which they ever hold, dearer than anything but gold. Thanks to my stars I now see sure, of courtiers, and of courts no more, thus stumbling on my city friends, blind chance my guide, my purpose bends, in line direct, and shall pursue, the point which I had first in view, nor more shall with the reader sport, till I have seen him safe in port. Hush be each fear no more I bear, through the wide regions of the air, the reader terrified, no more, wild ocean's horrid paths explore. Be the plain track from henceforth mine, cross roads to Allen I resign, Allen, the honour of this nation, Allen, himself a corporation, Allen, of late notorious grown, for writings, none, or all, his own, Allen, the first of lettered men, since the good bishop holds his pen, and at his elbow takes his stand, to mend his head, and guide his hand. But hold once more, digression hence, let us return to common sense, the car of Phoebus I discharge, my carriage now a Lord Mayor's barge. Suppose we may suppose, in verse, what would be sin in prose? The sky with darkness overspread, and every star retired to bed, the gewgaw robes of pomp and pride, in some dark corner thrown aside, great lords and ladies giving way to what they seem to scorn by day, the real feelings of the heart, and nature taking place of art, desire triumphant through the night, and beauty panting with delight, chastity, woman's fairest crown, till the return of morn laid down. Then to be worn again as bright, as if not sullied in the night, dull ceremony, business over, dreaming in form at Cottrell's door, precaution trudging all about, to see the candles safely out, bearing a mighty master key, habited like economy, stamping each lock with triple seals, mean avarice creeping at her heels. Suppose we too, like sheep in pen, the mayor and court of aldermen, within their barge, which through the deep, the rowers more than half asleep, moved slow, as overcharged with state, Thames groaned beneath the mighty weight, and felt that bauble heavier far, than a whole fleet of men of war. Sleep over each well-known faithful head, with liberal hand his poppies shed, each head, by dullness rendered fit, sleep and his empire to admit. Through the whole passage not a word, not one faint, weak half-sound was heard, sleep had prevailed to overwhelm, the steersman nodding over the helm, the rowers, without force or skill, left the dull barge to drive at will, the sluggish oars suspended hung, and even Beardmore held his tongue. Commerce, regardful of a freight, on which depended half her state, stepped to the helm, with ready hand, she safely cleared that bank of sand, where, stranded, our west country fleet, delay and danger often meet, till Neptune, anxious for the trade, comes in full tides, and brings them aid. Next, for the Muses can survey objects by night as well as day, nothing prevents their taking aim, darkness and light to them the same, they passed that building which of old, Queen Mother's was designed to hold, at present a mere lodging pen, a palace turned into a den, to barracks turned, and soldiers tread, where dowagers have laid their head. Why should we mention Surrey Street, where every week grave judges meet, all fitted out with hum and ha, in proper form to drawl out law, to see all causes duly tried, twixt knaves who drive, and fools who ride? Why at the Temple should we stay? What of the Temple dare we say? A dangerous ground we tread on there, and words perhaps may actions bear, where, as the brethren of the seas, for fares, the lawyers ply for fees. What of that bridge, most wisely made, to serve the purposes of trade, in the great mart of all this nation, by stopping up the navigation, and to that sand-bank adding weight, which is already much too great? What of that bridge, which, void of sense, but well supplied with impudence, Englishmen, knowing not the guild, thought they might have a claim to build, till Patterson, as white as milk, as smooth as oil, as soft as silk, in solemn manner had decreed, that on the other side the Tweed, art, born and bred, and fully grown, was with 1 milne, a man unknown, but grace, preferment, and renown, deserving, just arrived in town, 1 milne, an artist perfect quite, both in his own and country's right, as fit to make a bridge as he, with glorious pativinity, to build inscriptions worthy found, to lie for ever underground. Much more worth observation too, was this a season to pursue, the theme, our muse might tell in rhyme, the Wilshieth, but not the time, for, swift as shaft from Indian bow, and when a goddess comes, we know, surpassing nature acts prevail. And boats want neither oar nor sail, the vessel passed, and reached the shore, so quick, that thought was scarce before. Suppose we now our city court, safely delivered at the port, and, of their state regardless quite, landed, like smuggled goods, by night, the solemn magistrate laid down, the dignity of robe and gown, with every other ensign gone, suppose the woolen nightcap on, the flesh brush used, with decent state, to make the spirits circulate. A form which, to the senses true, the licorice chaplain uses too, though, something to improve the plan, he takes the maid instead of man, swathed, and with flannel covered over, to show the vigor of 80, the vigor of 80, above the proof of younger men. Suppose, the mighty dolman led, betwixt 2 slaves, and put to bed, suppose, the moment he lies down, no miracle in this great town, the drone as fast asleep as he, must in the course of nature be, who, truth for our foundation take, when up, is never half awake. There let him sleep, whilst we survey, the preparations for the day, that day on which was to be shown, court pride by city pride outdone. The jealous mother sends away, as only fit for childish play, that daughter who, to gall her pride, shoots up too forward by her side. The wretch, of God and man accursed, of all hell's instruments the worst, draws forth his pawns, and for the day, struts in some spendthrift's vain array. Around his awkward doxy shine the treasures of Golconda's mine. Each neighbor, with a jealous glare, beholds her folly published there. Garments well saved, an anecdote, which we can prove, or would not quote. Garments well saved, which first were made, when tailors, to promote their trade, against the Picts in arms arose, and drove them out, or made them clothes. Garments immortal, without end, like names and titles, which descend successively from sire to son. Garments, unless some work is done, of note, not suffered to appear, both once at most in every year, were now, in solemn form, laid bare, to take the benefit of air, and, ere they came to be employed, on this solemnity, to void that scent which Russia's leather gave, from vile and impious moth to save. Each head was busy, and each heart, in preparation bore a part, running together all about. The servants put each other out, till the grave master had decreed, the more haste ever the worse speed. Miss, with her little eyes half closed, over a smuggled toilet dosed, the waiting maid, whom story notes, a very scrub in petticoats, hired for one work, but doing all, in slumbers leaned against the wall. Milliners, summoned from afar, arrived in shoals at Temple Bar, strictly commanded to import cartloads of farpery from court, with labored visible design. Art strove to be superbly fine, nature, more pleasing, though more wild, taught otherwise her darling child, and cried, with spirited disdain, be hunter elegant and plain. Lo! From the chambers of the east, a welcome prelude to the feast, in saffron-colored robe arrayed, high in a car, by Vulcan made, who worked for Jove himself, each steed, high-mettled, of celestial breed, pawing and pacing all the way. Aurora brought the wished-for day, and held her empire, till outrun by that brave jolly groom, the sun. The trumpet hark! It speaks, it swells, the loud full harmony, it tells, the time at hand when Dulman, led by form, his citizens must head, and march those troops, which at his call, were now assembled, to Guildhall, on matters of importance great, to court and city, church and state. From end to end the sound makes way, all hear the signal and obey, but Dulman, who, his charge forgot, by Morpheus fettered, heard it not, nor could, so sound he slept and fast, hear any trumpet, but the last. Crape, ever true and trusty known, stole from the maid's bed to his own, then in the spirituals of pride, planted himself at Dulman's side. Thrice did the ever-faithful slave, with voice which might have reached the grave, and broke death's adamantine chain, on Dulman call, but called in vain. Thrice with an arm, which might have made the bandboxer curse his trade, the drone he shook, who reared the head, and thrice fell backward on his bed. What could be done? Where force hath failed, policy often hath prevailed, and what an inference most plain had been, Crape thought might be again. Under his pillow, still in mind, the proverb kept, fast bind, fast find, each blessed night the keys were laid, which Crape to draw away essayed. What not the power of voice or arm could do, this did, and broke the charm. Quick started he with stupid stare, for all his little soul was there. Behold him, taken up, rubbed down, in elbow chair, and morning gown. Behold him, in his latter bloom, stripped, washed, and sprinkled with perfume. Behold him bending with the weight of robes, and trumpery of state. Behold him, for the maxim's true, whate'er we by another do, we do ourselves, and chaplain paid, like slaves in every other trade, had muttered over God knows what, something which he by heart had got, having, as usual, said his prayers, go titter-totter to the stairs. Behold him for descent prepare, with one foot trembling in the air, he starts, he pauses on the brink, and, hard to credit, seems to think, through his whole train, the chaplain gave the proper cue to every slave, at once, as with infection caught, each started, paused, and aimed at thought. He turns, and they turn, big with care, he waddles to his elbow chair, squats down, and, silent for a season, at last with Crape begins to reason. But first of all he made a sign, that every soul, but the divine, should quit the room. In him, he knows, he may all confidence repose. Crape, though I'm yet not quite awake, before this awful step I take, on which my future all depends, I ought to know my foes and friends. My foes and friends observe me still, I mean not those who well or ill, perhaps may wish me, but those who haven't in their power to do it too. Now if, attentive to the state, in too much hurry to be great, or through much zeal, a motive, Crape, deserving praise, into a scrape. I, like a fool, am got, no doubt. I, like a wise man, should get out. Note that remark without replies. I say that to get out is wise. Or, by the very self-same rule, that to get in was like a fool. The marrow of this argument must wholly rest on the event, and therefore, which is really hard, against events too I must guard. Should things continue as they stand, and beauty prevail through all the land, without a rival, by his aid, my fortunes in a trice are made. Nay, honours on my zeal may smile, and stamp me Earl of some great isle. Sad smiley 23. But if, a matter of much doubt, the present minister goes out, fain would I know on what pretext I can stand fairly with the next. For as my aim, at every hour, is to be well with those in power, and my material point of view, whoever's in, to be in too, I should not, like a blockhead, choose to gain these, so as those to lose. 'Tis good in every case, you know, to have two strings unto our bow. As one in wonder lost, Crape viewed his lord, who thus his speech pursued. This, my good Crape, is my grand point, and as the times are out of joint, the greater caution is required, to bring about the point desired. What I would wish to bring about, cannot admit a moment's doubt. The matter in dispute, you know, is what we call the _quomodo_. That be thy task. The reverend slave, becoming in a moment grave, fixed to the ground and rooted stood, just like a man cut out of wood, such as we see, without the least reflection glancing on the priest, one or more, planted up and down, almost in every church in town. He stood some minutes, then, like one who wished the matter might be done, but could not do it, shook his head, and thus the man of sorrow said, Hard is this task, too hard I swear, by much too hard for me to bear, beyond expression hard my part, could mighty Dulman see my heart, when he, alas, makes known a will, which Crape's not able to fulfill. Was ever my obedience barred, by any trifling nice regard, to sense and honour? Could I reach thy meaning without help of speech, at the first motion of thy eye, did not thy faithful creature fly? Have I not said, not what I ought, but what my earthly master taught? Did I away, through duty strong, in thy great biddings, right and wrong? Did ever interest, to whom thou canst not with more devotion bow, warp my sound faith, or will of mine, in contradiction run to thine? Have I not, at thy table placed, when business called aloud for haste, torn myself thence, yet never heard, to utter one complaining word, and had, till thy great work was done, all appetites, as having none? Hard is it, this great plan pursued, a voluntary servitude, pursued without or shame, or fear, through the great circle of the year, now to receive, in this grand hour, commands which lie beyond my power, commands which baffle all my skill, and leave me nothing but my will. Be that accepted, let my lord indulgence to his slave afford. This task, for my poor strength unfit, will yield to none but Dulman's wit. With such gross incense gratified, and turning up the lip of pride, poor Crape, and shook his empty head, poor puzzled Crape, wise Dulman said, of judgment weak, of sense confined. For things of lower note designed, for things within the vulgar reach, to run of errands, and to preach, wellest thou judged, that heads like mine cannot want help from heads like thine, wellest thou judged thyself unmeet, of such high argument to treat. It was but to try thee that I spoke, and all I said was but a joke. Nor think a joke, Crape, a disgrace, or to my person, or my place, the wisest of the sons of men, have deigned to use them now and then. The only caution, do you see, demanded by our dignity, from common use and men exempt, is that they may not breed contempt. Great use they have, when in the hands of one like me, who understands the time and place, the person, manner, and the grace, which fools neglect, so that we find, if all the requisites are joined, from whence a perfect joke must spring. A joke's a very serious thing. But to our business my design, which gave so rough a shock to thine, to my capacity is made, as ready as a fraud in trade, which, like broadcloth, I can, with ease, cut out in any shape I please. Some, in my circumstance, some few, I, and those men of genius too, good men, who, without love or hate, whether they early rise or late, with names uncracked, and credit sound, rise worth £100,000, by threadbare ways and means would try, to bear their point, so will not I. New methods shall my wisdom find, to suit these matters to my mind, so that the infidels at court, who make our city wits their sport, shall hail the honours of my reign, and own that Dullman bears a brain. Some, in my place, to gain their ends, would give relations up, and friends, would lend a wife, who, they might swear, safely, was none the worse for wear, would see a daughter, yet a maid, into a statesman's arms betrayed. Nay, should the girl prove coy, nor know what daughters to a father owe, sooner than schemes so nobly planned should fail, themselves would lend a hand, would vote on one side, whilst a brother, properly taught, would vote on the other, would every petty band forget, to public eye be with one set, in private with a second heard, and be by proxy with a third, would, like a queen, of whom I read, the other day her name is fled, in a book, where, together bound, Whittington and his cat I found, a tale most true, and free from art, which all Lord Mayors should have by heart, a queen might those days begin, afresh, when queens would learn to spin, who wrought, and wrought, but for some plot, the cause of which I've now forgot, during the absence of the sun, undid what she by day had done, whilst they a double visage wear, what sworn by day, by night unswear. Such be their arts, and such, perchance, may happily their ends advance, from a new system mine shall spring, _locum tenens_ is the thing. That's your true plan. To obligate the present ministers of state, my shadow shall our court approach, and bear my power, and have my coach, my fine state coach, superb to view. A fine state coach, and paid for two. To curry favour, and the grace, obtain of those who're out of place, in the meantime that's to say, I myself here stay. But hold perhaps unto the nation, who hate the Scots administration, to lend my coach may seem to be, declaring for the ministry, for where the city coach is, there, is the true essence of the mayor, therefore, 4 wise men are intent, evils at distance to prevent, whilst fools the evils first endure, and then are plagued to seek a cure, no coach a horse and free from fear, to make our deputy appear, fast on his back shall he be tied, with 2 grooms marching by his side, then for a horse through all the land, to head our solemn city band, can anyone so fit be found, as he who in artillery ground, without a rider, noble sight, led on our bravest troops to fight? But first, Crape, for my honour's sake, a tender point inquiry make, about that horse, if the dispute is ended, or is still in suit, for whilst a cause, observe this plan, of justice, whether horse or man, the parties be, remains in doubt, till 'tis determined out and out, that power must tyranny appear, which should, prejudging, interfere, and weak, faint judges overawe, to bias the free course of law. You have my will now quickly run, and take care that my will be done. In public, Crape, you must appear, whilst I in privacy sit here, here shall great Dullman sit alone, making this elbow chair my throne, and you, performing what I bid, do all, as if I nothing did. Crape heard, and speeded on his way, with him to hear was to obey, not without trouble, be assured, a proper proxy was procured, to serve such infamous intent, and such a lord to represent, nor could one have been found at all, on the other side of London wall. The trumpet sounds solemn and slow, behold the grand procession go, all moving on, cat after kind, as if for motion never designed. Constables, whom the laws admit, to keep the peace by breaking it, beadles, who hold the second place, by virtue of a silver mace, which every Saturday is drawn, for use of Sunday, out of pawn, treasurers, who with empty key, secure an empty treasury, churchwardens, who their course pursue, in the same state, as to their pew, churchwardens of St. Margaret's go, since Pearson taught them pride and show, who in short transient pomp appear, like almanacs changed every year, behind whom, with unbroken locks, charity carries the poor's box, not knowing that with private keys, they open and shut it when they please, overseers, who by frauds insure, the heavy curses of the poor, unclean came flocking, bulls and bears, like beasts into the ark, by pairs. Portentous, flaming in the van, stalked the Professor, Sheridan, a man of wire, a mere Pantene, a downright animal machine, he knows alone, in proper mode, how to take vengeance on an ode, and how to butcher Ammon's son, and poor Jack Dredon both in one, on all occasions next the chair, he stands, for service of the mayor, and to instruct him how to use his A's and B's, and P's and Q's, over letters, into tatters worn, over syllables, defaced and torn, over words disjointed, and over sense, left destitute of all defense, he strides, and all the way he goes, wades, deep in blood, over criss-cross rows, before him every consonant, in agonies is seen to pant, behind, in forms not to be known, the ghosts of tortured vowels groan. Next heart and duke, well-worthy grace, and city favour, came in place. No children can their toils engage, their toils are turned to reverend age. When a court dame, to grace his brows, resolved, is wed to city spouse, their aid with madam's aid must join, the awkward dotard to refine, and teach, whence truest glory flows, grave 60 to turn out his toes. Each bore in hand a kit, and each, to show how fit he was to teach, a city, an alderman, a mayor, led in a string a dancing bear. Since the revival of Fingal, custom, and customs all in all, commands that we should have regard, on all high seasons, to the bard. Great acts like these, by vulgar tongue, profaned, should not be said, but sung. This place to fill, renowned in fame, the high and mighty Lockman, 25, came, and, never forgot in Dulman's reign, with proper order to maintain, the uniformity of pride, brought brother Whitehead by his side. On horse, who proudly pawed the ground, and cast his fiery eyeballs round, snorting, and champing the rude bit, as if, for warlike purpose fit, his high and generous blood disdained, to be for sports and pastimes reigned, great Dymock, in his glorious station, paraded at the coronation. Not so our city Dymock came, heavy, dispirited, and tame, no mark of sense, his eyes half closed, he on a mighty dray horse dozed. Fate never could a horse provide, so fit for such a man to ride, nor find a man with strictest care, so fit for such a horse to bear. Hung round with instruments of death, the sight of him would stop the breath of braggart cowardice, and make the very court draw cancer quake, with dirks, which, in the hands of spite, do their damned business in the night, from Scotland sent, but here displayed, only to fill up the parade, with swords, unfleshed, of maiden hue, which rage or valour never drew, with blunderbusses, taught to ride, like pocket pistols, by his side, in girdle stuck, he seemed to be, a little moving armoury. One thing much wanting to complete the sight, and make a perfect treat, was, that the horse, a courtesy, in horses found of high degree, instead of going forward on, all the way backward should have gone. Horses, unless they breeding lack, some scruple make to turn their back, though riders, which plain truth declares, no scruple make of turning theirs. Far, far apart from all the rest, fit only for a standing jest, the independent, can you get a better suited epithet? The independent Amiens came, all burning with the sacred flame of liberty, which well he knows, on the great stock of slavery grows, like sparrow, who, deprived of mate, snatched by the cruel hand of fate, from spray to spray no more will hop, but sits alone on the housetop, or like himself, when all alone, at Croydon he was heard to groan, lifting both hands in the defence of interest and common sense, both hands, for as no other man adopted and pursued his plan, the left hand had been lonesome quite, if he had not held up the right. Apart he came, and fixed his eyes, with rapture on a distant prize, on which, in letters worthy note, there a £20,000 was wrote. False trap, for credit sapped is found, by getting £20,000, nay, look not thus on me, and stare, doubting the certainty to swear, in such a case I should be loat, but Pericust, 28, may take his oath. In plain and decent garb arrayed, with the prim Quaker, fraud, came trade, connivance, to improve the plan, habited like a juryman, judging as interest prevails, came next, with measures, weights, and scales, extortion next, of hellish race, a cub most damned, to show his face, forbid by fear, but not by shame, turn to a Jew, like Gideon came, corruption, Midas-like, behold, turning whate'er she touched to gold, impotence, led by lust, and pride, strutting with Ponton by her side, hypocrisy, demure and sad, in garments of the priesthood clad, so well disguised, that you might swear, deceived, a very priest was there, bankruptcy, full of ease and health, and wallowing in well-saved wealth, came sneering through a ruined band, and bringing bee in her hand, victory, hanging down her head, was by a Highland stallion led, peace, clothed in sables, with a face, which witnessed sense of huge disgrace, which spake a deep and rooted shame, both of herself and of her name, morning creeps on, and, blushing, feels, war, grim war, treading on her heels, pale credit, shaken by the arts, of men with bad heads and worse hearts, taking no notice of a band, which near her were ordained to stand, well nigh destroyed by sickly fit, looked wistful all around for pit, freedom at that most hallowed name, my spirits mount into a flame, each pulse beats high, and each nerve strains, even to the cracking, through my veins, the tides of life more rapid run, and tell me I am freedom's son. Freedom came next, but scarce was seen, when the sky, which appeared serene and gay before, was overcast, horror bestrode a foreign blast, and from the prison of the north, to freedom deadly, storms burst forth. A car like those, in which, we're told, our wild forefathers warred of old, loaded with death, 6 horses bear, through the blank region of the air. Too fierce for time or art to tame, they poured forth mingled smoke and flame, from their wide nostrils, every steed was of that ancient savage breed, which fell Geryon nursed, their food, the flesh of man, their drink his blood. On the first horses, ill-matched pair, this fat and sleek, that lean and bare, came ill-matched riders side by side, and poverty was yoked with pride, union most strange it must appear, till other unions make it clear. Next, in the gall of bitterness, with rage which words can ill express, with unforgiving rage, which springs from a false zeal for holy things, wearing such robes as prophets wear, false prophets placed in Peter's chair, on which, in characters of fire, shapes antic, horrible, and dire, inwoven flamed, where, to the view, in groups appeared a rabble crew, of sainted devils, where, all round, vile relics of vile men were found, who, worse than devils, from the birth, performed the work of hell on earth, jugglers, inquisitors, and popes, pointing at axes, wheels, and ropes, and engines, framed on horrid plan, which none but the destroyer, man, could, to promote his selfish views, have head to make or heart to use, bearing, to consecrate her tricks, in her left hand a crucifix, remembrance of our dying Lord, and in her right a 2-edged sword, having her brows, in impious sport, adorned with words of high import, on earth peace, amongst men goodwill, love-bearing and forbearing still, all wrote in the heart's blood of those, who rather death than falsehood chose, on her breast, where, in days of yore, when God loved Jews, the high priest wore, those oracles which were decreed, to instruct and guide the chosen seed, having with glory clad and strength, the Virgin pictured at full length, whilst at her feet, in small portrayed, as scarce worth notice, Christ was laid, came superstition, fierce and fell, an imp detested, even in hell, her eye inflamed, her face all over, foully besmeared with human gore, over heaps of mangled saints she rode, fast at her heels death proudly strode, and grimly smiled, well pleased to see such havoc of mortality, close by her side, on mischief bent, and urging on each bad intent, to its full bearing, savage, wild, the mother fit of such a child, striving the empire to advance, of sin and death, came ignorance. With looks, where dread command was placed, and sovereign power by pride disgraced, where, loudly witnessing a mind, of savage, more than human kind, not choosing to be loved, but feared, mocking at right, misrule appeared. With eyeballs glaring fiery red, enough to strike beholders dead, gnashing his teeth, and in a flood, pouring corruption forth and blood, from his chafed jaws, without remorse, whipping and spurring on his horse, whose sides, in their own blood embayed, even to the bone were open laid, came tyranny, disdaining awe, and trampling over sense and law, one thing, and only one, he knew, one object only would pursue, though less, so low doth passion bring, than man, he would be more than king. With every argument and art, which might corrupt the head and heart, soothing the frenzy of his mind, companion meet, was flattery joined, winning his carriage, every look, employed, whilst it concealed a hook, when simple most to be feared, most crafty, when no craft appeared, his tales, no man like him could tell, his words, which melted as they fell, might even a hypocrite deceive, and make an infidel believe, wantonly cheating over and over, those who had cheated been before, such flattery came, in evil hour, poisoning the royal ear of power, and, grown by prostitution great, would be first minister of state. Within the chariot, all alone, high-seated on a kind of throne, with pebbles graced, a figure came, whom justice would, but dare not name. Hard times when justice, without fear, dare not bring forth to public ear, the names of those who dare offend, against justice, and pervert her end. But, if the muse afford me grace, description shall supply the place. In foreign garments he was clad, sage ermine over the glossy plaid, cast reverend honor on his heart, wrought by the curious hand of art, in silver wrought, and brighter far, than heavenly or than earthly star, shone a white rose, the emblem dear, of him he ever must revere, of that dread Lord, who, with his host, of faithful native rebels lost, like those black spirits doomed to hell, at once from power and virtue fell, around his clouded brows was placed, a bonnet, most superbly graced, with mighty thistles, nor forgot, the sacred motto, touch me not. In the right hand a sword he bore, harder than adamant, and more fatal than winds, which from the mouth of the rough north invade the south. The reeking blade to view presents, the blood of helpless innocence, and on the hilt, as meek become, as lamb before the shearers dumb, with downcast eye, and solemn show, of deep, unutterable woe, mourning the time when freedom reigned, fast to a rock was justice chained. In his left hand, in wax impressed, with bells and gewgaws idly dressed, an image, cast in baby mould, he held, and seemed overjoyed to hold. On this he fixed his eyes, to this, bowing, he gave the loyal kiss, and, for rebellion fully ripe, seemed to desire the antitype. What if to that pretender's foes, his greatness, nay, his life, he owes, shall common obligations bind, and shake his constancy of mind? Scorning such weak and petty chains, faithful to James he still remains, though he the friend of George appear, dissimulation's virtue here. Jealous and mean, he with a frown, would awe, and keep all merit down, nor would to truth and justice bend, unless outbullied by his friend. Brave with the coward, with the brave, he is himself a coward slave, awed by his fears, he has no heart, to take a great and open part, minds in a subtle train he springs, and, secret, saps the ears of kings, but not even there continues firm, against the resistance of a worm, born in a country, where the will of one is law to all, he still retained the infection, with full aim, to spread it wheresoever he came. Freedom he hated, law defied, the prostitute of power and pride, law he with ease explains away, and leads bewildered sense astray, much to the credit of his brain, puzzles the cause he can't maintain, proceeds on most familiar grounds, and where he can't convince, confounds. Talents of rarest stamp and size, to nature false, he misapplies, and turns to poison what was sent, for purposes of nourishment. Paleness, not such as on his wings, the messenger of sickness brings, but such as takes its coward rise, from conscious baseness, conscious vice, overspread his cheeks, disdain and pride, to upstart fortune's ever tide, scowled on his brow, within his eye, insidious, lurking like a spy, to caution principled by fear, not daring open to appear, lodge covert mischief, passion hung, on his lip quivering, on his tongue, fraud dwelt at large, within his breast, all that makes villain found a nest, all that, on hell's completest plan, ere joined to damn the heart of man. Soon as the car reached land, he rose, and, with a look which might have froze the heart's best blood, which was enough, had hearts been made of sterner stuff, in cities than elsewhere, to make the very stoutest quail and quake, he cast his baleful eyes around, fixed without motion to the ground, fear waiting on surprise, all stood, and horror chilled their curdled blood, no more they thought of pomp, no more, for they had seen his face before, of law they thought, the cause forgot, whether it was or ghost, or plot, which drew them there, they all stood more like statues than they were before. What could be done? Could art, could force, or both, direct a proper course, to make this savage monster tame, or send him back the way he came? What neither art, nor force, nor both, could do, a lord of foreign growth, a lord to that base wretch allied, in country, not in vice and pride, effected, from the selfsame land, bad news for our blaspheming band, of scribblers, but deserving note, the poison came an antidote. Abashed, the monster hung his head, and like an empty vision fled, his train, like virgin snows, which run, kissed by the burning bawdy sun, to lovesick streams, dissolved in air, joy, who from absence seemed more fair, came smiling, freed from slavish awe, loyalty, liberty, and law, impatient of the galling chain, and yoke of power, resumed their reign, and, burning with the glorious flame of public virtue, Mansfield came. Thanks for watching the channel. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Or if you would like to support the channel, please visit the link in the description to visit our Patreon page. Like the pictures in the video? Visit the link in the description to see more. Thanks again for watching.